in for Jesus, who is
Okay,
absent with a medical procedure today.
okay. So would you do a roll call for us, JR?
I will do it for you. Robert Bernowski. Present. Peter Hernandez. Present. Elizabeth Martinez.
Here.
Patricia Moore.
Yes, sir.
Elsa Rodriguez.
Here.
All present, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And those need to, license,
Please
to
stand.
stand. Please stand. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, can I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you. So we're going to start off with interviewing and seeing the presentations for the search firms that apply to our RFP.
All right, Madam, if I could, while we're waiting, just a couple of minutes for the first team to come in, I would just like to cover the groundwork here a little bit, that there are 4 teams of individuals that will be presenting to you today. I'm not sure, I know the first team has 2 representatives here that will speak for them. We have PowerPoint presentations for each of them. They will be guiding you through the presentation through a PowerPoint and through their explanation of how they conduct a superintendent search. I would suggest that you let them go through the presentation, jot down any notes that you may have in the form of questions. If you question a timeline or how they do their paper screening or how they recommend advertising, all those types of things, feel free to jot down a question and ask them as soon as they finish their presentation. Then you can ask questions about them. We have them timed on a 30-minute basis, even though you see 45. We've told them that they have 30 minutes to make the presentation, and that will give you about a 15-minute flex time, meaning that you might go a little bit over, and it also gives you a moment to breathe in between each one. So that's kind of the schedule, and that's the way we're going to operate. I see our first firm representatives coming in. Hi, Diane. Hi, Jackie.
Good evening. Good evening.
Ladies, we've just opened the meeting and called roll and have done the flag salute. And we are moving now into the only action we have for this. This is a special board meeting in which the board is interviewing firms that have applied to be the superintendent search consultants. And you ladies who I've met just before this meeting starts, and also I have known for a long time, are first on the agenda.
Good.
So your PowerPoint is on, I see. So if you would like to, I know we've given you a little bit of time in the conference room to get your things together, but you are officially up at this time.
Great.
So
That's what I wanted, the clicker. Thank you so much.
Diane,
It's separate from the packet we have already.
It's a little bit of additional
I think it's
information.
additional, I'm not sure you have everything that's in this packet.
while Miss Jackie here is passing out the notes, I think that it would be wrong of me not to tell you that I've known Diane Siri here, who's at the microphone for a long time. And just to give you why we have known each other, though it's been a few years since we've reacquainted, we were neighboring county superintendents during the same 16-year period.
Oh, wow.
Diane was the county superintendent of Santa Cruz County and was sworn in the same day I was, retired 16 years later on the same day that I retired. And
Is this the buddy system?
and so that's not like we chose a day. At the end of a term, your term expires and you choose to rerun or not. And after 16 years, we both decided that we had given it all we could. And so Diane, it's good to see you again. Dr. Diane Siri. And I told her when she called me the other day to ask if she could be a candidate here that I never, ever recall a bad moment of working with her. I will honestly tell you that we had a good, friendly, professional relationship. So I think a lot of her and her colleague Jackie was with the Santa Clara County Office of Education and in programs that I'm not quite sure like I can remember, so I'll let you recall them. But I just said it would be wrong of me not to tell you that I've known Dr. Diane Siri for over 25 years. And we worked together for 16 of those years, though it's been a few years since then.
Yes.
And welcome back. Why are we doing this? I don't know.
Well, it is the business of networking, and I think we're going to try to tell you that part of our strength is the connections, both recent and prior, that we have that we hope to bring to your search. To tell you a little bit more about myself, prior to working with Bill, I was a math teacher in Berryessa, and then I was in the Poplar Valley Unified School District for 11, 12 years as a teacher, vice principal of the final at Watsonville High School that you may know of. Then since retiring, as Bill said, we've done a number of things. I worked for the Irvine, Packard, and Stewart Foundation. Stewart is Carnation Mouth, doing grants primarily for very diverse districts to encourage college and career options, expanded college and career options for students. So I worked with Los Banos, actually before Pacheco High School opened, and then for 5 years, bringing them money from the Irvine Foundation and another organization I work with, the California Academic Partnership Program. I have a doctorate from Columbia, and I have done searches for the last, I guess it's almost 4 years now, 6 in the last year. Very diverse districts well, every district is unique, and we have pride in customizing our services based on your individual needs and the uniqueness of Hollister. The fun project I worked on this summer, and I think it was referred to in our proposal, I went with 375 leaving 8th grade, 9th graders to UCLA for 4 nights. It's amazing to me that their parents trusted us to do that, but the parents all came on Saturday. And it's one of the projects that I do with the California Academic Partnership Program. Again, very diverse districts all over the state. So that is what I have been doing for the last years since retiring as county superintendent, and we'll tell you a little bit more later.
Thank you, Diane. Well, I have, as Diane has stated, a long list of things that I've done in my over 45-year career, but I most recently retired as a superintendent from San Jose, the district called Union School District. I was there for 9 years. Prior to that, I worked as a theater principal and administrator at the County Office of Education. I was a regional director for Region 5, which is the region that you folks are in. Worked with San Benito County, Monterey County, Santa Cruz County, as well as in Santa Clara County. I have also been doing a lot of various types of executive leadership things. So after I retired, I did the executive leadership seminar series with 3 different counties, working with the superintendents, trying to teach them all of the things that would enable them to successfully lead their district. I also coach administrators, so I'm an administrative coach for superintendents, assistant superintendents, and principals. I work in the administrative credential program with aspiring administrators in South County, and I've had several of your aspiring administrators in my classes this last year. And I've done, as Diane has said, a lot of searches in the last year and a half. We have been looking at approximately, I was trying to count today, about 150 different candidates that I've personally interviewed to see what they're really about. What are their interests? Where is it going to be a match? And one of the things about that is that by doing all of these searches, it really gives us a huge database that we can look at for potential recruits for districts such as yours. So I really enjoyed that. One of the things that I especially enjoy is working with the new administrators in their positions and working with their boards of education, because the governance team work is so important to make sure that new superintendents transition with the new board that they're going to be working with and become a really effective governance team. So that's about all that I can say about myself before I bore everyone to death. But let me tell you a little bit about HYA. So I want to try to point out some of the things that are really unique about HYA, because I think that it's one of the things that we can really bring to the district that no one else can. One of these things is the board portal. We have online an executive search portal, which is actually a way that you are able as board members to take a look and see all the things about the candidate. So unlike a lot of search firms where the candidates get the resumes, the candidates get the letters of recommendation, the candidates do all the paper screening, and then they just bring it to you. Say, here's what we have. Here's our top however many. We don't do that. We have a portal. You get to go on the portal and you see everything about the candidates that comes in. So if Diane puts in her application to be a candidate for your position, you are able to go in, you see her letters of reference, you see her resume, you see her application. So you're really able to be in the loop and really, have an insight into the candidates that are interested in it. And we think that that's one of the things that's unique about us. Also, I think one of the things you need to, take into consideration is our firm. We've done over 1,200 searches. We have a huge network, a huge database. We have 100 associates. When we find, a district that we're working with and we say, hey, we're looking for a candidate that has these attributes. This is what the district's looking for. Who do you know? We call our associates. We call the people that we work with. It's a really effective and very robust system. We also have staff. So our main offices are in Chicago. There are 30+ full-time staff members there that we can call on if we need help with anything. So these are all things that I think you need to take into consideration about our firm. Again, one of the things that makes us different is that we not only have a national reach, but we also have a local focus. So Diane and I are very familiar with this area. I lived and worked in what we call South County when you live in Santa Clara County, for almost 40 years. So we're familiar with the area, Diane of course is, and we have a local focus and we really work on that. But we also have a national reach if there are people from outside of the area that are interested in your district. We have a research-based process. You'll see in the folders that I just gave you, there's a white paper on what research says makes the most effective superintendent. And what you'll see is a lot of the questions in the community survey are based on those attributes. We'll be talking about that in a little bit. You have executive oversight and due diligence, which are really important. One of the things that the board really needs to look at is to make sure that the due diligence has been taken care of with whoever they bring to the board to, be a potential candidate. So Diane is going to talk to you a little bit about our methodology. We have a very precise, articulated methodology of how we do the process, and it's worked over many, many years. So Diane is going to run you through that.
So what Jackie didn't tell you is we arm wrestled to get this search. Jackie and I both kind of live in your backyard. My husband was president of Santa Cruz Farm Bureau and was a farmer in South Santa Cruz County. And as Jackie said, she doesn't live very far either. I was amazed how quickly I got here. So we both feel a great commitment to each of our searches and decide carefully if we want to be the candidate. We only work in the Bay Area. So that's where the bulk of our contacts are. So phase one is engage. That's the first phase where we would work with you. First of all, a planning meeting. Could be as early as next week. I noticed you have, this is an action item, but you also have a board meeting scheduled for next week. Depending upon a later straw timetable we will show you, we are ready to go as you are, because this is an unusual time of year to be looking. I'm sure you're already aware of that, but we think there's an advantage and would feel committed to giving a faster track option, if that is your option and if you are available. So the first phase would be planning a meeting where we would map out the whole process. We would talk about from beginning to end, and we see that we could make that appointment if you looked at our timetable. Really stretching it at your November board meeting, but certainly your December board meeting, if that is what you want. There are pluses and minuses to a slower strategy, which we would talk to you about at the planning meeting, if we were lucky enough to be selected, and there are advantages to moving more quickly and allowing a candidate to transition over the holidays, potentially. So this engage phase is very important, where we get to know you, you get to know us. Our next step is, after we have a calendar that we've agreed to, and hopefully where all 5 of you can be at every meeting, and we understand there's a November election coming up, potentially there could be a board member change, so we'll talk about that in a minute also. But our next step after the whole plan has been developed at that first meeting would be to survey the district. We conduct interviews, and you asked in your RFP about community engagement. We feel that's also one of our unique strengths. Jackie and I would spend a minimum of 4 days being present at each of your schools, interviewing your district office staff, doing a community meeting in the evening. Yo entiendo bastante español para hablar con los estudiantes, de padres, de cosas de escuela, pero I notice as the years go by, necesitan más espacio. I do the community meetings usually with, it's interesting in the last couple of years with someone from your district because of the trust issue. We're outsiders, we're asking people to come tell us about your district and what they think you should be looking for in a new superintendent. So we want to meet with the DLAC, your special ed parents. We do evening community groups as well as usually a parent group at each or some of the schools for their site council or parent leadership group. We meet with staff. We meet with the union leadership. We meet with both CSEA and your teachers groups or any other representative groups you have. And all of that gets folded into what we call a leadership profile, and ultimately the criteria that is unique to the Hollister district, the characteristics that you are looking for in a new superintendent. And we use that with our candidates, and we also encourage you to use it in screening candidates and in your interviews and looking for that best match. Because the best compliment we get, I mentioned that I did 6 searches, and I have to tell you in my 3 years, I mentioned to Bill, all of the candidates that we have recruited are still in their position. So we're very proud of that, and we keep in touch with them also. Yes?
How many years would you say each, on average, have stuck around?
The HYA average is
Pretty long.
it's over 5.
Yeah, I think
And
it's
if
over 5.
someone leaves in less than 2 years, I think you noticed in our proposal that we come back and do the search for free. So we have a commitment, along with you, to find the best match possible for your district. But that criteria becomes really very important and totally unique to Hollister. We couldn't predict now. And usually we do the in-person focus groups. We also do an online survey, and we encourage the schools. The good part about the timing is there may be some back-to-school nights. We encourage the school principals to maybe have a room at the school where parents can go in and do the online survey right while they're at open house or back-to-school night. So we use every opportunity we can, and those would happen in our fastest track calendar during the month of September. So that's the first phase, engage. And then Jackie will talk about phase 2.
Right, and I did want to also mention that we additionally interview each one of the board members separately, individually, because we really want to make sure that we capture your perception of what it is that you need in your next leader for the district. And usually at the high school, we always try to get the students Yeah, so see what they.
But the middle
what they see.
school, student council,
Right,
usually has very good ideas.
and they all want a swimming pool.
Yes.
So in terms of methodology, the next one I want to talk to you about is just the recruitment phase. And again, one of the things that we do, that most other firms do, is, advertise in the traditional media. So in the proposal, you saw that we have 3 different EdCal ads. We also do EdJoin, which is online, and all the traditional ones, the Association of Latino School Administrators, et cetera. But what's unique to us, and again, I think it really differentiates us, is our HYA link or website or whatever you want to call it. It's really the go-to place for superintendent positions. It's one-stop shopping. And the new generation, the younger generation, of course everybody's younger compared to me, but they aren't as hooked on print media as people of my age are. So they go to our HYA because we have all of the superintendent positions that are listed, whether it's for our firm or not. And that's where people go. And they want to see what positions are open. So if you want to become a superintendent, you go to HYA because you're going to see all the other superintendent positions that are available, even if it isn't one that is one of the searches for us. So again, I think that's really something that's very unique. And of course, they have featured placement, which means that if they are an HYA search, it tends to be higher up on the list. But also, as Diane said, which I think is really unique, is our proactive recruitment. As I mentioned, between the two of us, we have probably hundreds at this point of people that we have personally interviewed, because these are our last couple of searches. We had well over 40 candidates for each of them. So one of the things, again, that's unique about us is that we pre-screen everybody that we believe, is a viable candidate based on the paperwork. So when we get, 40 or 50 candidates that are in the portal, we will do a paper screening of all of those, but then we decide, okay, of these, there's probably 25 or 30 that look viable. We actually do a pre-screening with them. I don't think any other one of the search firms do that. They usually just do a paper screening. So I think, again, another thing that kind of sets us apart, and in my opinion, at least makes us second to none. When we've done that, then of course, we do the screening, as I mentioned, and then the interviews, and then a reference check. And this is also something that I'm not sure all the other firms do. We do a reference check of all the people that, we're pre-screening to find out, just because we pre-screened them and we thought their answers were good, who do we know that knows somebody else? And this is just kind of that, backdoor way of finding out, because as you probably all know, everybody knows everybody else. You can't be in this business a long time without knowing somebody that knows somebody. So it's one of the things that we do. And again, because, we've been doing this a while and have a good reputation for confidentiality, we're really able to, find out all the things that need to be found out prior to anyone being selected. So Diane's
Just a time check. We have about 10 minutes left,
Okay.
and we'd like to leave a little bit of time for questions. from the board if we.
All right.
Okay.
So next to the select phase.
Yes, let me add on the recruitment phase that I think 6 of our last 7 searches have been in K-8 districts. And there's some very good candidates that weren't necessarily a match for that district, but may be a perfect match for you. So as Jackie said, I think about 20% of our applicants come from our print media, which is interesting. The rest comes from calling, reaching out, and networking with other people. The select phase is a much more concise. For that one, we would bring a slate to you. That's a meeting of about 2 hours. Now, even though we will recommend the candidates that we think are the best match for you and explain from our references and our interview why, you will have seen all the applications. You can choose to put any of those in, or often a board will say, that's interesting, I saw this name, why didn't you recommend? And unfortunately, we sometimes know, I just talked to a candidate
who was very strong in my last search, and her teachers just voted a no confidence vote. She said, but it didn't get in the paper. And I said, oh, okay, so that's the kind of thing you will count on us to know, even if it's not in the paper, because how embarrassing would that be if that person was your appointment and your teacher union will call their teacher union president and they will say, duh, didn't you know we're not very happy here in such and such district. So we will present a slate. Our process is a little bit different, and I don't want this to prejudice against us, but we ask that you do 2 interviews with a separation. The first one is a structured interview, about 18 to 20 questions, about 90 minutes long. You ask all the candidates the same questions. The second interview, we recommend be somewhat informal. You're going to be working with this person and solving some potentially difficult issues. So we suggest you do a breakfast, a lunch, a dinner, or snacks or something. In our culture, when you eat around food, there's a different conversation. They're interviewing, but sometimes they forget it. But you really get a sense at that second interview, we think, a little bit who they are as a person and whether they would be a match for you. They might have all the papers and all the degrees, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're a match for Hollister. And then again, we do background checks again at this level. So we do background checks 3 different times.
Okay, I'm going to slip into the transition phase because after the selection, and Diane told you really how the process generally goes, then we also stay with you for the transition. So we meet with your new superintendent and the board. We actually go over the leadership profile with the new superintendent, so the new superintendent really has an understanding of what are those things that are most important to all the stakeholders in this district. We also offer optional transition services. So Diane and I just finished our 5th and final board governance workshops in the district that we had placed a new superintendent, and the board really wanted to make sure they had a strong governance team together. So we worked with them on the transition, also helping with the superintendent and the board decide what are going to be the goals for the superintendent for the first year, what are the priorities, what are going to be the success indicators, so that we can hold the superintendent accountable for their success towards what you want that superintendent to work on. We work with strategic planning, governance dashboards, and do anything that you might need us to do in addition to the superintendent selection. The cost structure you have in your packet, we have all-inclusive. So as you can see, I believe you all have the cost there. It's $21,300, which is all-inclusive. All the advertisements, our travel, our expenses, everything is wrapped into that. But we also have guarantees, which again are very unique. Ours is a fixed price, and it's literally 24/7. Diane and I can tell you how often we're on the phone, weekends, evenings, there's just always something. And we really pride ourselves on being able to provide you with that kind of service. And it's just part of what we do. She mentioned to you the non-solicitation of a new superintendent within 3 years. So if we place somebody, we do not, ever solicit that superintendent that we've just placed for 3 years goes to any other opening that we may have. We also guarantee that if the superintendent leaves during the first year under any circumstances, or we will do the search without cost, or within 2 years, if the majority of board is in place, no cost. And lastly, our guarantee is that we price match. If there's a firm out there that has comparable service, and I want to really emphasize that because I think we do a lot of things that other firms don't. There's a firm out there that does comparable service to what we offer, we'll price match.
Questions? Well, let me just make 2 other points. If you think we're the best match and price is the barrier, we would have that discussion with your board president or interim. I just want to, as I mentioned earlier, the timeline that's in there allows for 3 optional activities. If you had a new board member that joined you in November, our timeline does allow, if this board chooses, to involve them in the final phase. Again, it would be your decision because you are the 5-member official board that is authorized to vote and make this selection. But we have had a situation last year that a board chose to involve a new board member as a community member. They do not vote, they do not sit in with you, but we have strategies that could involve their input if you chose to do that. We also have an optional community involvement in the interview process. I would say that happens about a third of the time.
Probably even more rare than that, yeah.
Maybe a quarter, where for what we want your new superintendent to be successful. And if you say to us, this person, in order to be successful in Hollister, we need to involve people beyond the board, then we have a process that does that. We just did it in Loma Prieta. They interviewed separate from the board. They do not recommend to you, but they give you input. And then I think that was it.
Yeah, and I think, again, to emphasize, it's really your timeline. It's not our timeline. So, you know, we, in the planning meeting, will sit with you and you'll be the ones that are the, you know, ultimate decision makers in terms of how the process will go on in terms of timeline.
I know my third one. If you want to do an optional site visit. That's becoming less and less popular just as the community input sessions and big input because of confidentiality and because you'll be interviewing during the school year. Often a candidate will not want their current board member. If they're one of 40, they may not want their current district to know that they're looking or considering another option. At the finals, all bets are off. But early in the process, we can maintain confidentiality with you so that if someone makes the finals, that's different. But we can arrange an optional site visit if you want to go visit the district where the person is currently working and interview people directly beyond our background searches and the information you got through their letters. So now I think that's.
Now we can ask questions.
All right.
I have a question regarding your confidentiality, and it has to do with the board portal. You said there's lists of people. How do you maintain confidentiality there?
You have a password and there's a unique portal created for the Hollister School District. There are only 7 people that have access to that other than our office staff that set it up. The 5 of you, and you will have a password, and the 2 of us.
So we would sign a statement of confidentiality.
I was just gonna say that, then it's up to the confidentiality of the readers
Right.
to keep that confidential.
And you can understand why it's important to candidates, especially that aren't going to be a match for you. And we have the community committee members sign a confidentiality agreement, but quite honestly, it gets a little harder at that point when other people are involved. As board members, you deal with confidential information all the time and you understand what that means. But we have had good luck. I talked to a former candidate the other day that made it to the top 3, and she was a current superintendent, said, and very concerned, very small school district. And I said, did it ever get out that you were a candidate? And she said, no, I'm amazed. And occasionally it does, but we do our best until that final stage. Because at that final stage, we start calling a lot of people too. And while we tell them it's confidential, occasionally comments are made.
So you mentioned Ms. Kramer, right? Siri.
Siri's the last name now. Actually, it was Kramer when I was principal at Watsonville High.
I just wanted to address you correctly.
Did you go to Watsonville High?
No. But yeah, so I had a question about, you mentioned the early start, that there would be an advantage. What do you think the advantage would be in starting early and getting the superintendent hired?
We think actually there's an EdCal deadline next Monday, which if you make the selection tonight, we would actually get the ad in next Monday for publication on September 11th. Then they take a 2-week break, and Bill knows this, all those intricacies, which is why you hire someone. But I think there is an advantage right now because if we started early, And if you are all available, because the key is, I don't know the five of you and how flexible your schedules are for all the interviews and the parts that you're involved in. But assuming you were available and saw that advantage, we could be done with the selection in November. The appointment has to be made at a regularly scheduled board meeting, and you have one December. I looked at your board calendar. I have it in my notes, but I won't take the time. You have a mid-December board meeting where the final announcement could be made, which would then, in some cases, now one of the things we ask in our pre-screening is, are you prepared to make a transition during the year? But if a candidate was in a position and with a district where that transition could happen, you have the holiday period for the transition potentially. So that's the advantage. It probably seems like a long way away, but it isn't with all the steps that have to happen. So we actually would suggest, if we're selected, that we meet with you as soon as possible to map out their timeline and actually start the interviews at the school sites and with the staff within the next 2 weeks.
And just for the board's information, while you have a scheduled fourth Thursday of every month, fourth Wednesday,
Tuesday.
Tuesday of every month.
Close.
Close. I only have 5 choices. In December, the meeting has to be held in the first 15 days of the month because it's an organizational meeting. So the meeting that Dr. Siri is talking about I think it's scheduled for the 14th or 15th. It has to be scheduled within the first 15 days of the month by code.
And ironically, by code, the appointment has to be, I'm sure some district tried to slip through an appointment years ago. So now it is law that you have to make the appointment at a regularly scheduled board meeting in open session. So with the early timeline, not only do we think candidates would have time to make a smooth transition, we think that holiday period allows for a potential move closer or something if it wasn't. But we think there are a number of candidates locally that will be very interested.
What if there is failure with this fast tracking? Is your fee good for until we find one?
Good question, Robert. Yes. And what we would suggest, and again, so many of the details with our short time, at the planning meeting, we might adopt 2 calendars. At the slate presentation, which is where we discuss your candidate pool and we make recommendations, we would ask you, is it a go at that point? If you do not feel there's the caliber of candidate and the potential that you're looking for at that slate presentation, we would probably suggest extending the timeline. So that's point 1. The second point is after you interview. I haven't personally had it happen, but some of our associates had, where the board goes through the process and maybe a candidate takes another job or for whatever reason, their timeline doesn't match yours. The second point would be not making a decision after the first round of interviews and extending it into the new year. So our fee is until someone is hired.
And the timeline is flexible too. I mean, if we get started and then, your schedules become impacted or, something comes up, I mean, it's not cast in concrete. This is just our working timeline together.
And as you know, because you've recently gone through it, the candidate most likely will be contracted as a superintendent or assistant superintendent, and they have to request release from their current employer and be approved. They cannot sign 2 contracts. That's a violation of law. It's a violation of their contract. It's a code of ethics violation that could subject to revocation of their credential. So you've been through this recently, so it's just a reminder that your final candidate will have to request release from their contract.
And what we, in my last 2, because they were fairly late, I just finished one a few weeks ago, and the candidate did live in Southern California, they will buy back some days from the current district. So even though the district wasn't comfortable with an early release of the person, they're buying 15 days of the person from his current district to allow for a transition, and then he'll officially start on a future date. Yes, Elizabeth?
So when we did our last search, it was perfect timing because pretty much everyone on the board stayed on the board. This one, we've got 3 openings. So for, I don't know if Rob and I would be the only ones that would be still on the board,
For certain.
for certain. Unless something happens. But yes, so, there are 6 candidates running at this time. So how could, to not exclude their input, because we would know which of those 6 would be sitting on this board, but I'm thinking, trying to think ahead, to include them in this pool of information and what they're thinking as well for our superintendent, because I don't want for us to come for that December meeting, and if we are really excited about a candidate and then we get outvoted, that would just really be a drag. And so I want to try to, I'm worst case scenario. So I just wanted to see by having those 6 people somehow in that loop of this process. And then, so when it comes to them being voted in, or whoever gets voted in November, we would know by the December meeting that their input and their participation in this process has been since, day one, and who we selected, regardless of who's sitting here, would still be in accord and in agreement to who. And that was I think, as a sitting board now, when we selected Dr. Andrew, that it was the positiveness and the vote of confidence that we either had as a group or we didn't, it had to be unanimous.
Right.
Because that sets the tone.
That's a good point to reach out to the.
Let's talk about a couple of options.
So there are a couple of options, and I do think that, this is something that you need to discuss in greater depth as a group, as well as, whichever firm you pick when you do the timeline with them, you need to. There's a number of different options. One option is, as Diane mentioned, if you had a community meeting and the candidates that are running could be part of the community meeting, and maybe at that point, there might be, let's say, 6 semifinalists, you might be able to, include all 6 of them. They would not be able to vote necessarily, but they would at least have a chance to,
Have some
hear-
background.
Give you input.
Right. The other thing is, and I think it just really does depend on, what you all decide, you could in fact, wait and make the final selection at the December meeting when the new board members are there, just to make sure that the new superintendent feels I have the unanimous support, or January, whenever. Again, these timelines are pretty flexible. So there's a lot of ways to do it. I think the critical question for you folks who are sitting there right now is, who do you want to make the decision? Will it be you, or will it be the board that may get elected?
If I can interrupt, I think that's a discussion for the board.
Right.
And I know they'll discuss this. I think the point we want to hear from you is that you can either speed up or slow down
can,
the process to meet the needs of the board.
Absolutely.
The board has a decision to consider a change on the board that we know will be at least 2 seats. And one incumbent is running, and we will let the outcome say what it is, but we know how we feel. But there will be at least 2 seats because 2 members are not running, again, are not signed. So this board's decision on how to deal with the superintendent search regarding the outcome of the November election.
Correct.
Because it sounds to me like your process will clearly take us past November 6th.
Yes.
And so we will hopefully know, even though the election can take up to 30 days to certify, or 20 days up to certify, this board will discuss how it feels about the involvement of the people, of the top vote getters in that November election. So I think the main thing we want to know from you as a person, as a team wanting to get this search, is that you can speed it up or slow it down, and you will work with the outcome of the decision of this board.
Absolutely.
Sorry, Peter?
I have one last question. It actually goes along with your statement, Dr. Barr. So, what Liz mentioned basically was about creating a good start to this new superintendency and consistency from the board as far as support and creating obviously a sense of stability within the district, good relationships with all the stakeholders. And, I've definitely been thinking about this a lot, so I know that when it comes down to credentials, it's going to be a really important consideration when we're vetting these superintendents. But to a certain extent, there's a lot other things that, well, one thing in my mind that really matters, and that's longevity. So 2 years was tough to have a quick turnover like this. That's automatically creating instability within our district. And it doesn't matter, ultimately we wish Dr. Andrew the best, but on our end, we have to make sure that we protect ourselves from turnover like that. So all I'm saying is I know credentials matter, but to what extent are you going to be able to protect us from turnover and even ensure that we have longevity from the next superintendent? And I know you have that 2-year guarantee.
But we don't, I've never had to use it, and we hope
Yeah.
it wouldn't be here.
Let me
Sure.
just answer that from personal experience. So the district that I worked in as superintendent in San Jose, the previous superintendent had been there for 13 years. My board members have been there, some of them 23 years, some of them 21 years. I mean, it was a very stable district. When they hired me, they asked, the board said, how long are you planning on being here? And I told them I was going to be there until the end of my career. This was where I wanted to be. I stayed there 9 years, and they were happy with that. When we did the search for my position, when it was open, the search firm and the board made sure that whoever you get, make sure that that person is committing to do exactly what you and the previous superintendent and vet it. Make sure that that person is planning on being there. So you're not gonna hire somebody who's 35 years old, probably, in their, the peak of their career. You're gonna wanna hire somebody who is probably really committed to, sustainability in that position. So I think it's something that the search firm can work with you folks on. If that's a high priority, that you want to make sure that whoever you get is planning on staying. You can't guarantee that they're going to stay, but intentions are important. And most of the people you will be looking at for these jobs have high integrity. If they say they're going to stay for a minimum of 5 years, unless there's something really, unusual that would happen, I would think that they would keep it.
Gonna have to call it,
Thank you, Madam
Good.
Chair. I should have done that for you. Timekeeper here, unless there's any other absolutely burning questions, which we could always follow up with phone call or emails after this meeting, but I think if there are no other questions, Madam Chair, I would suggest we thank these two ladies.
Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you very much for coming.
Appreciate your input.
Thank you so
Robert,
much.
thank you.
Really nice having a chance to be
This is
here.
a long-term commitment.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Sustainability.
This is a privilege.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
People
you.
always ask you questions now.
If I'm Apple Siri.
Did you mention I saw your last name and I thought, I'm not looking at this right.
She's the one on your phone. It's your home saying.
I tried to convince my daughter I dated Steve Jobs. Thanks, Bill. Good to see you.
Oh, nice seeing you. Take care.
Take care.
You guys have a safe trip back.
Thank you. Not very far.
No, it's not.
And my car's right out here. May I go out the
Counties.
store?
Yes, you can. Just watch for traffic around the curve, Penny. There's a little curve right here, so just make sure.
Watch the traffic.
Watch
Oh, okay.
It's like a speedway right now.
Thanks, Tim.
Let's see, who's up?
Well, we,
JJ Consulting.
and,
Erica Witt.
where did Erica go?
She went to go around.
Yeah, she's gonna bring in, we're gonna move right along,
Yeah,
okay?
we don't have time.
Yeah.
Yes.
Did we go with 30 or 45?
Hold on to the 45. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening, how are you all today?
Good. Good, how are you?
Hello
Nice to
there.
meet you. I'm Bill Ball.
Mike Escalante.
I'm Mike.
How are you, sir? James Gavin. Yes, it's pleasure.
Richard Ward.
Hi, how are you?
James
Oh,
Gavin.
Mike Escalante.
Yes, ma'am.
Robert
Good to
Is that the same one or is it?
Oh, you got copies? Yeah, I
Oh,
see
this,
small.
yours looks
Thank
bigger.
you for the.
It's the same.
If you could leave me.
Yeah, but I, Mike is gonna go.
Oh, no, that's right. I don't
I would take one expression. We'll explain
Thank
it.
you, Mike Escalante.
Oh,
Thank you for the.
Yeah,
good.
you can have them all if you like.
This is branded right here.
All right. All right, how are you?
Good.
Thank you.
James Gavin. All right, I'll take that.
I'm gonna see. I'm gonna see.
But I come in peace.
We're all, yeah, we're all, it's quite a network, I know. Yeah, we
We have a lot of.
kid a lot about it, you know.
Yeah.
And then I talk.
Yeah, there's a bunch of us in Texas, South Texas. My, on the Gavin side, yes.
You make that up.
Valley.
Yeah.
We're in the Valley.
Well, we always say.
Roma, Stark County.
I'm from Arlington.
Oh, okay.
You get a great.
Fantastic. So very Texas. If you hear me say y'all, that's why.
I used to say it.
I say, I've lived.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you,
Awesome.
gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you.
Gentlemen, just to give you an idea of timing, and again, I know you've just introduced yourself personally to each of us, but we'll start out with requesting you to make an introduction of yourself personally and then professionally, how you're affiliated with your organization. And we are working on a 45-minute capacity, but we'd like your presentation to be 30 minutes.
Okay.
And I mean, you don't have to go 30 minutes, so we would like to contain it to 30 minutes. And then if we have any questions we can ask you, that would be fine. We try to stay online. We're a little behind right now.
No worries.
So it's, Madam Chair, are there any other points, or would you like to turn it over to now?
Would you please,
It's all yours.
Okay, well, thank you again for the opportunity to be here this evening, Madam President, distinguished members of the board, Mr. Superintendent, members of the staff and community. My name is James Guerra. I'm the president and CEO of JG Consulting. We're a 1/4 consulting firm. We'll dive into all of the elements and aspects of our presentation. Joining me this evening is my colleague, Dr. Mike Escalante, who's locally based in the great state of California. As you may have noticed from my accent and the choice of word that I use to greet each of you, I'm a native of Texas. I have spent some time out here on the West Coast and the East Coast, but we have a team of consultants nationwide. So it's important to notate that we are a national search firm. Our headquarters is based in Texas. However, we have representation across the United States. The other colleague who is not here this evening would be Dr. Pat Leonidas. She is also based out of Texas, but has extensive experience across the United States serving in various capacities. Is there anything you'd like to add about your background?
Just to share with you, my name is Mike Escalante, and I'm a former teacher, principal, and superintendent 2 times, Fullerton and Glendale Unified School District, and also currently a professor, and I've actually been doing searches for the past 8 years, and I've partnered up with James on this particular project. We think it's a real special job.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir. All right, so that's a little bit about our work. So all of the documents you have in front of you are here on the screen as well. So I'm not going to speak verbatim to each of these, but really just highlight some of the critical points. So our mission is simple. It's to be equitable, inclusive, and transparent, working with each of you and with my team as a team of 8, if you will. Now, I mentioned earlier that we are a firm that represents school boards and school districts and communities across the country, East Coast to West Coast. So we have at our disposal retired superintendents very similar to Dr. Escalante, Dr. Leonidas, who will work with us in this capacity. So it's not just the 3 of us, but rather representation of 30 other retired superintendents from the East Coast to West Coast to represent you. Now, the 3 of us myself, Dr. Escalante, and Dr. Lenados will be present with boots on the ground. We will be the individuals working with your community, working with each of you, working with your staff, your students, and any individuals at a macro and micro level to identify and to understand what you're looking for in your next superintendent of schools. And our impact. A lot of things can measure the success of a superintendent, as we all know. At the end of the day, it's about the students. It's the outcomes that the students have from the educational experience going through the Hollister School District. So we seek their input when we're getting and garnering feedback on what's important to them and their next leader to serve here in Hollister. And the satisfaction, of course, of each of you, because it's important as the managers of the next superintendent of schools that you have a great working relationship with this next superintendent. So at this juncture, I'd like to point out that we represent you and not the candidates. So that's critically important. Point being, we don't have a stable of candidates to choose from. We will identify the qualities and skill sets through working with you, hearing and learning from each of you, working with your staff, your students, and your community members at all levels to understand what's important in your next leader. So we're not, in other words, recycling a superintendent that we have may have placed down the road in Oakland or anywhere else in the state of California or arguably across the United States. We're going to identify the best level of talent to align to the characteristics and attributes that are customized through our work together collaboratively to serve here in Hollister. Measuring success. This is just a simple snapshot of some of the current work that we've engaged in. As Dr. Escalante alluded to, he's fairly new to the team working with us. However, has had extensive experience working across the state of California and has placed a number of sitting superintendents in the past 8 years, closer to a decade. And we do have experience working in the state and doing other related projects, which I'll get to in a moment. But to give you some context, we've done roughly 60 executive searches in the last 4 years. And I mentioned earlier in my opening remarks that we're a full service firm, meaning as a part of the executive search work, we do any type of executive search from the principalship up to the superintendent and everything in between. We recently did a general counsel search for a local district, athletic director, facilities and transportation. Today, we were asked to do a technology director search for a large urban district in Dallas-Fort Worth. We had a state contract that you might see with the New York Department of Ed, where we had 12 executive searches going simultaneously for New York, ranging from migrant directors to ELL directors. So you can see that we run the gamut of various executive searches, not just the superintendent. And I mentioned that to illustrate and highlight the depth of our network. And which is a good segue to some of the differentiating factors. So we seek out experienced practitioners at the K-12 level and even at the post-secondary level. And if you have heard from other firms, you may notice that there's some synergy there, but where we also have some strengths to differ is that we have access to not only the traditional, but the non-traditional sectors. So if you think of philanthropic groups, educational organizations that have practitioners who are serving them as maybe an executive director, due to our work and the nature of our work nationwide, we will actually be able to tap into those resources as well. In a moment, I'm going to get to the interview portal to show you what that looks like. But just to give you some context on the experienced practitioners, we're going to touch every end of the spectrum across the United States, if that's something you're seeking. And again, I mentioned that we represent you and not the candidates. You will tell us as a board if you'd prefer to have a national search or if you'd rather have a regional, meaning a California-based search. That's entirely up to you. And we'll work within the parameters of whatever our directive is. And the guaranteed success rate. Our track record is tremendous. This is something we hang our shingle on. All of the sitting superintendents that we've recruited are currently still serving in his or her seat. You may have heard some statistics that the superintendent longevity or lifespan, a district this size is about 3.1 years nationally. And larger districts, in a district perhaps the size of Dr. Escalante's former district, or even shorter, it's 2.8 years. Of all the superintendents we've ever placed, knock on wood, they're still serving in his or her seat today and have even been given contract extensions. And that's something we're very proud of. Yes, sir.
Can you just bring it down to our understanding, 3.1 as far as how big of a district?
At about this size, so I'm using the student enrollment, the population of the district this size. So our particular sweet spot, and when I say sweet spot, the district sizes that we generally work are around the size of Hollister and up to the large urban districts. So because our team is 30, consists of a faculty base of 30 experienced superintendents, we tend to be very intentional with our work. So we only have one other superintendent search that we are managing at this very moment, which will give us plenty of bandwidth and opportunity to serve you with intentionality and to be very visible and transparent in your community. So districts your size, nationally speaking, using national data, the lifespan of a sitting superintendent is about 3.1 years. Larger districts, like let's just say Los Angeles Unified, it's even shorter, it's 2.8 years. And that's just going off the national data. And if you were to look at the American Association of School Administrators website, I believe they have a recent study that was published on their website that speaks to some of this data that you can refer to. And it's tangible data.
Isn't LA Unified appointed by the mayor? Let's remove that from the database.
Actually, it's appointed by the county board of supervisors.
Really, superintendent?
Yeah.
Okay, the county superintendent, yeah, the county superintendent is. County
Right.
superintendent.
And
Oh, yeah, of course, yeah, they
Right.
would be county,
Yeah,
So-
New York City is appointed by the mayor. Chicago Public Schools appointed by the mayor. So there are some anomalies and exceptions, but those are definitely some differentiating factors, and it varies depending on the state.
So you're saying your average is 6 years?
6+ years, and all of them have gotten an extension. And that goes for all of the positions. So I would even venture to say that from the principalship up to the superintendent or State Department, in the case of New York, those individuals that we've supported in the recruitment efforts, they're still serving in his or her role. And then part of that goes to our differentiating factor of being a full service firm. We provide other services such as a board of 6 training with this new superintendent. We have a national academy where we train aspiring superintendents to serve in the superintendent's role. In fact, our West Coast trainer who manages our cohort for the West Coast region of the United States is Dr. Vincent Matthews, who's currently the superintendent at San Francisco Unified. He's our West Coast trainer. Our Texas up to the Midwest is also, he's a Californian, born and raised here, Dr. Xavier Del Torre. He's our central kind of Midwest area superintendent. And then our East Coast is Dr. Lavelle Brown, who is the superintendent in Ithaca, and he was just recognized Superintendent of the Year in the state of New York. So we have some tremendous firepower to give you some context of the type of work we're doing. And that's just one element. And then we also represent as advisors, if you're familiar with Emerson Collective, they're a venture capital firm out of Palo Alto. They're owned and operated by Laureen Jobs, Steve Jobs' wife. And we're on retainer to help them as special advisors to a number of their ed tech companies. So those are the 3 primary pillars of what we do: the executive search work, leadership development, executive coaching, team training, and then special advisors to ed tech companies is how we maintain operability. And if you bear with me, I'm going to try to toggle over to the, I see it here, the online interview component. So this here is the biggest, I would argue, probably one of the bigger differentiators of how we operate. So one thing that we do during our process is we invite the candidates to complete an online interview. And the online interview will be made accessible to each of you to give you an understanding in advance of the in-person interviews who the candidates are. And it will help you further screen and vet the candidates before we choose to invite them in on plane, trains, and automobiles to meet with you in person.
When you say online, are you talking about video?
Yes, sir. So it's pre-recorded. So this was a recent search that we did in South Texas. This is Donna, Texas, in the Rio Grande Valley. Excuse me, I want to go back. Touchpad's a little sensitive. Roughly 90%, 99% Latino population. The interesting sidebar with this particular community, they had a history of having state conservator oversight, which in the state of Texas, the educational commissioner inserted somebody to maintain proper governance. They had a history there in the community where governance wasn't very tight, like you're accustomed to. So there was a lot of eyes and ears on this particular search, with the conservator being assigned from the state and the commissioner there locally. So this board wanted to recruit candidates from outside of the Rio Grande Valley. So if you're not familiar with that part of Texas or that part of the world, it's very remote. It's the tip of South Texas, so it borders Mexico. So we were having to recruit folks from all over the United States to serve there and take on the challenge of turning a system around that, for lack of better words, has been considered corrupt. But we had a tremendous opportunity to help them in that effort. And we were able to name a lone finalist just a few months ago with the board. And I'm sorry, my vision is terrible. Sorry, thanks for indulging me. As I get older, my eyesight starts to. So what you're gonna see, each of the candidates will be asked 4 questions. They're all asked the same 4 questions. I'm only gonna show one clip to give you a sense of what the platform looks like. So the first question, what drew you to the position of superintendent with Donna Independent School District? How will the experience support your long-term goals and aspirations? The candidates have 2.5 minutes to answer this question. And again, you will have access to all of these videos to get a sense of who the candidates are, what their skill sets are, their demeanor. They treat it just like a standard interview, but make no mistake about it. This is not to replace the in-person interview. This is just to give you a greater sense of who they are before we bring them in for an in-person interview. So this is a key differentiator for us. We're the only firm that utilizes this technology. So I'm going to play this short clip and then we'll go back to our presentation.
Hello, my name is Jose Moreno, and I want to thank you for this opportunity. As a 21-year educator, I've spent most of my career as a school reform consultant as well as instructional leader. As a school reform consultant, I've worked with some of the neediest schools, both bilingual and non-bilingual, in the San Antonio area, Chicago, Illinois area, Hartford, Connecticut, Lawrence, Massachusetts, and Providence, Rhode Island. And as an instructional leader here in the San Antonio area, I've worked as a teacher, a principal, a senior executive director for curriculum and instruction, assistant superintendent for leadership, as well as superintendent. And through all of my years of experience, there's one thing that I can tell you, is that education is not always equal. And knowing that, it gives me the drive and the ambition to continue moving forward and to be the change agent to support a school district and to making sure that every single student that we serve has an equal opportunity to a quality education. One of the reasons that I applied to Donna ISD is because I'm excited about the direction that the district is heading. I recognize that there's been a great amount of instability in the past few years with superintendents. What I'm seeing now with this current board of trustees is that you're making student-centered decisions that are courageous and heading in the right direction. And I want to be a part of that. As a team of 8, heading forward and moving with a clear vision and mission and making student-centered decisions versus adult-centered decisions, I know that we can become the premier school district that every parent would want their kids to be a part of. When I think about myself long-term and the goals that I want to achieve as a superintendent, the number one goal that I want to know that I've done is that I've made a difference. And as a team of 8, if you and I can come together, I know that together we will make Donna ISD, the premier school district of the Valley.
Did he get the job?
He actually took another position a little bit later, but no, he did not. He was, believe it or not, that candidate pool was incredibly deep, and he was not in our top 10. So we actually had 10 others that were presented. Sorry?
What's the dangling participle?
The dangling participle. Yeah. So I'm not sure how
I think he was reading.
and he might have been. So the other unique thing I'll point out about this feature, so there's 4 questions that there'll be at. Each of the candidates have the same 4 questions. If you notice at the bottom, there's an assessment component. So if you're familiar with any of the traditional like Myers-Briggs, our platform that we have exclusive access to, it prompts them to take a personality professional assessment. It gives you as a board an idea of what their leadership style is like. And it gives a brief descriptor to each of them. They answer a series of questions and then you get this report. So in his particular case, he was classified as a mentor analyzer. So this is a feature, again, that's unique to us. We're the only group in the US that uses an online tool such as this one. And we think that in the feedback we get from our board partners in our districts is that this is one of the favorite features of our systemic process, because it gives you great insight to who the candidates are, what they offer, their experiences, their skill set. Because oftentimes nowadays, the formal paper that you get, letters of interest, the resume, the vita, reference letters, doesn't tell enough of a story. This adds a little bit more to that story so they can articulate who they are before you choose to use taxpayer dollars to bring them in for an in-person interview. Because they may look very good on paper, but if they don't present up to par for what you're looking for in the online interview, it helps us kind of sift through the weeds, if that makes sense. So that's in essence, pretty much how the montage interview interface works. Very user-friendly. When we present the candidates to you, you'll have access to all of the videos. If you wanted to see every video, we'll walk you through the videos. You'll have a portfolio in front of you with all of the artifacts that the candidates present. We have a few non-negotiables that we ask for. We require a letter of interest, resume, your references. We have what we call a confidentiality oath, which my team is bound to. We want to respect the integrity of the process, make sure we're protecting your confidentiality as a district, as a board, but also the candidates, because I would imagine you will have sitting superintendents applying for this position. We would be mindful of their current employment status. And then we also have a background check component, which I'll get into a little bit later in greater detail. But we outsource our background check to a third party by the name of Baker Eubanks, and we incur the cost for that. The comment that I like to make at this point with the background checks is that if Jacques Cousteau dropped the treasure chest in the bottom of the Pacific, Baker Eubanks would find any glaring discrepancies with the candidates. Unpaid parking tickets, liens on their home, poor credit, if they misrepresented their academic credentials, the robust paperwork that is returned to us for your review of a candidate that gets to the final rounds. It's anywhere from 20 to 40 pages per candidate. So it's a very robust and in-depth scrub of a background check, including social media. So that's the interface. So you kind of get another screenshot of what it looks like. Very user-friendly, 24/7 access to that. I talked earlier a little bit about the recruitment. I won't hit on all the main points, but due to our network and the vast diversification we have as a full-service firm, you can see that we gain exceptional talent through the different resources that we work with. Dr. Escalante mentioned that he chairs the SC program. With the Ascending Track and Rising Talent, having a pulse on these various leaders, different universities, different organizations is tremendous for us. I don't know if you're familiar with any of the acronyms there in front of you. I mentioned AASA, the American Association of School Administrators, ALAS, the Association of Latino Administrators and Superintendents. Another colleague of ours who leads that superintendent's leadership program, Dr. Jose Leyva, He's based out of the Phoenix area, and he's a retired superintendent and actually served as the president of a community college in LA County. Yep. And CUBE, which is being held in Las Vegas this year. It's the Center for Urban Boards of Education. We're presenting at both CUBE and ALAS on a talk track of the executive recruitment of a superintendent. We've been handpicked by ALAS, CUBE, MASBA, and NABC. Will be held in November. That's the National Alliance of Black School Educators. We're also presenting there on the recruitment process that we're speaking about this evening. So you can see that we have inroads with a lot of the major national organizations, which helps us keep a pulse on the talent, and it keeps us very relevant. And each of those organizations identified us to speak. This time frame isn't set in stone. This is just a shot in the dark based on some research we did and what you presented to the public and what I read through the RFP. And again, this isn't something that's set in stone. It's really just suggested based on what we learned, but we could speed it up. We could slow it down. I would say if you were to engage in a superintendent search process 5 years ago, at that point in time, the time frame used to be 6 to 9 months. Because we have such a strong technology and efficiency recruitment channel, we're able to do a superintendent search anywhere from 3 months at minimum to 4 months. Not again to compromise the integrity or to marginalize the process, but because of our networks and the way in which we work in a very systemic way, we can shorten the time and leverage less of your taxpayer dollars in the community and the district's time. But I'll also say, at no point will we ever love you and leave you. We're here for the long haul. We're in this for the long ball game. So once the superintendent is hired, you have myself, you have Dr. Escalante, you have Dr. Linares at your disposal to work with the incoming superintendent for as long as you need. So these are just some of the highlight timeframes, but we would anticipate that the application could potentially close in November. We could have the candidate reviews with each of you mid-November and name a lone finalist before the December break. And that's, again, just hypothetical. Some recent testimonials. Fort Worth Independent School District, they serve about 88,000 students in the greater DFW Metroplex. Their trustee, he was actually the board president at the time when we were retained. They were in an interesting scenario where they were at an impasse and needed some significant help. We recruited Dr. Kent Scribner, who has some experience in California, actually. He was serving as the Phoenix High School Union superintendent before we recruited him to Texas. San Marcos Consolidated, I wanted to call attention to this district. They're about the same size as your local district here in Hollister. In fact, that's where I cut my teeth as a teacher. And they were a wonderful district and community to work with, similar size to in scope and in demographics. And last, go ahead.
You said you cut your teeth as a teacher?
Yes, sir.
Yet that's not on your resume?
I've been in the private sector since 2002.
Okay.
Yeah. But I taught as an alternative certified math teacher when I was in college in my first year out. Yeah. And I gave you guys a shout out. I wanted to show the impression that we can make using social media. So when we were invited, I guess a week and a half ago to come meet with you tonight, I used our premium LinkedIn profile that I can control and manage. It's also linked to our Twitter account. So you'll notice there, I said, thank you, Hollister School District, for the invitation and interview. We look forward to meeting you in person. And this was a matter of days. You can see it was 4 days ago. We had almost 1,300 views and 20 likes and several comments. So to give you some context of our reach, there's marketing firms that couldn't gain this kind of momentum in 4 days. And so we're proud of the fact that our presence and our footprint gets as much attention as it does. But just to publicly say thank you before we're here, this is how we did it. And that wraps up our formal presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Did you include a fee schedule?
I did in our original proposal, and the total all-inclusive cost, if I may answer publicly, was $18,000, not to exceed. So that includes everything that you heard tonight, all the expenses, all the advertising, the background checks, everything. So the total fee is $18,000.
I had a question, sorry.
Good.
The second and third slide you had up there, and there were a number of school districts that names may be common to Texas and California. So I wanted, because there was a San Benito up there,
Sure.
and I would expect that's the San Benito County in Texas.
No, actually, it's San Benito Consolidated Independent School District in the Rio Grande Valley. Consists
Okay,
of
so
about-
it's in
yeah,
Texas,
It's
rather-
it's
and-
different.
There's like the San Marcos, there's a San Marcos in Southern.
Correct. Yeah, there's a lot of commonalities with Texas and California. Dr. Escalante gave me his list. I don't know if you'd like to.
Yeah, these are just districts locally. Over the period of the last 8 years, I've probably done about 40 plus searches. And just here up Northern California, I've done Oakland twice. I've done Orcutt. I've done Cabrillo twice, Scotts Valley once, Ukiah once, and Bakersfield once. So very familiar with the area.
So, but a great question.
I have to tell you, I got very confused with you because were your parents teachers or educators or?
Yeah, so the way I started, and that's an interesting story. So I was a undergraduate student in San Marcos, actually Texas State at the time of Southwest Texas.
And what I'm looking for is your ability to relate to the superintendent.
Okay, yeah, so I started.
I got him, by the way.
Yeah. So I started I started teaching part-time at San Marcos High School, San Marcos Consolidated Independent School District. And in many states, you have an alternative route to licensure. They were encouraging me to teach full-time and stay in that game. But truthfully, I was recruited to be in the publishing work, working at the time. The company's name was Voyager Expanded Learning, which is there on my resume. And that is a K-12 organization based out of the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So I relocated from where I grew up in the Austin area, Central Texas, about 3 hours north. 6 years ago, I'm fast forwarding now and leapfrogging some area to give you some context into this. 6 years ago, I was recruited to manage one of the national search firms that's no longer in operation. The CEO and the president sold their assets and intellectual property to another group. And so I was managing the executive search firm and the other 3 or 2 entities within the umbrella of that one company. So to understand these processes and to refine what I learned during that time frame is how I arrived to founding my company 4 years ago. So I've been fortunate and blessed to have Dr. Escalante and some other significant power players in our K-12 work to join my team since then. We've done, you can see in a short period amount of time, some pretty significant work around the United States.
And there's a third person that would be involved in the search, but we don't have their resume.
That's correct. So Dr. Lenatus would be involved in this work, and she is a retired superintendent from Fort Worth ISD and Crowley Independent School District. Fort Worth served 88,000 students, and Crowley served 22,000 students. So I mentioned earlier that within our line of work, we typically kind of gravitate to the districts this size, to the large urban school systems. That's what I would consider to be our strengths, because the superintendents that work with us as our faculty, those are the size of districts that they've served in. So Dr. Escalante included in that faculty base. And of course, right up the road in San Francisco, we're fortunate to have just brought on Dr. Matthews to be one of our executive coaches for our academy. And he just joined our company. If you go to our website, you can see all the bios. It's jgconsulting.us. There's a faculty page. You can see the bios, a short bio descriptor for each of them. But terrific question. So that's the Cliff Notes version of my career path. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions?
So the only other one for me is, you mentioned that you do leadership development. So what does that look like? And the reason why I asked this question, so it's kind of two-part, I guess, in that sense, is I'm assuming that leadership development will actually help not only, well, have top superintendent, but obviously help the district, maybe with longevity, so I couldn't imagine, as a superintendent, they have a lot of understanding of what it means to be a superintendent, right? That's why they have that credential. But when it comes to why they would stay as a whole, it's hard to measure. So all I'm saying is, when it comes to developing leadership, what does that look like, and how would that, or anything else, protect us
Sure.
from turnover?
Yeah, and I think you touched on an important point. So it's also an assurance, a quality assurance to work with you and the community and the staff to ensure the longevity of the superintendent. And sometimes a board will identify what I like to say, a neophyte superintendent, someone who's brand new to the seat, who might have been a deputy superintendent or an assistant superintendent, but has never served as a superintendent. So they're learning alongside working with the five of you and the staff. So helping them grasp the different, functionalities of being a superintendent, because they may have come from a background that's very specific, like curriculum and instruction. May have not ever served in the financial world of a school system. So there's all these different moving parts and components. And where Dr. Escalante himself has tremendous experience, he's been at various levels and at all levels of the district, from finance to being a high school principal, an elementary principal, superintendent, a deputy superintendent. So all those layers of experience really add tremendous value to a brand new superintendent, or even a new superintendent or a sitting superintendent who may not have had the same depth of experience as Dr. Escalante, for example, in the finance world. Because Dr. Linares and Dr. Escalante both teach at their local universities the finance course. And what any superintendent who serves in a role will tell you, a good CFO, a good business department, a good HR department can make or break you in your longevity as a superintendent. That's common ground and a fair statement to make. Because it is such a critical element of the functionality of the school system and the success of that. So that's one area. And, we train aspiring principals and central office staff as well. So our curriculum shells range from principalship up to the superintendent.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Great question.
Thank you.
I have a quick one. Just location. You're in Texas. You're in California. Dr. Linares is located also in Texas?
She's in Texas, and we do have other representatives here in the state of California.
Who would actually be working with us?
The three of us, and three of us excluding our invisible partner, Dr. Linares. So we would come here and work with the staff, the community, work with you on whatever schedule we determine together collectively, but we will be your boots on the ground. Earlier I mentioned that we have only one other superintendent search that we're dedicated to, but to use a sports analogy, we're on the back nine of that right now, so we're rounding out that process, and they're actually starting interviews next week, so we'll technically be done.
And you have a corporate office in San Jose?
We do. So we leverage the Regis offices, if you're familiar with that brand. We could use any of those offices and their conference rooms worldwide. We in fact just hired a retired superintendent in the province of Toronto, Canada, because we intend in 2019 to start working in Canada as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate y'all. Pleasure meeting all of you.
Thank you.
No, it was just this all the time.
Nice seeing you again.
Fight on.
Thanks for coming by.
Thank you very much. It's 1.5 hour drive and I have fun.
Well, that's nice.
It's not a problem.
Appreciate it. Thank you. It's a pleasure meeting you.
Thank you, James.
Did you? Which school? I can't remember. Was it high school or elementary?
No, elementary. But we lived in South Redondo. A lot of the school districts.
South Redondo?
Mm-hmm. So you taught there.
I've got a place on it.
There you go.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate you.
Yep.
And you left the place in South Redondo?
Yeah. It's because we wanted to raise our.
I don't want to
kids
tell you what it's worth now.
here. I know.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Clark, did you know them before they just responded?
Mike and I think maybe we met somewhere along the line. He was in Glendale and
Thank you very much.
I visited and done some work with some of the districts. International.
Take care. Michael, we were talking about, obviously.
Right, I know the area. We were kidding because I did my doctorate at Laverne, which is the competitive school in USC in Southern California. And then I taught at Berkeley, his doctorate at USC, and we have a big rivalry. Actually, the Cal Bears and the Trojans.
How are you? I'm Bill Hewitt.
Nice to meet you. Good to see you. I'm Bill Fire. Nice to meet you.
I have a nifty pen for each of you.
Oh, you can multiply in the drawer.
That's right.
You know that. Thank you.
Hi.
Good evening. How are you?
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Nice to meet you. How are you? Hi, Rob. One of our famous pens.
Thank you.
And is there one more for you?
Yeah, they're here to set up.
Okay. I'll wait a minute.
Okay, your next company is McPherson Jacobson LLC.
Shall I wait while your other board member comes in?
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah.
oh, yeah. I didn't realize he's different.
Yeah. My information is I have about 20 minutes for a presentation and then 15 for questions. Is that kind of the schedule that you're on?
That's correct.
Okay. Such a nice ride over here tonight.
It was a beautiful day.
Yeah, beautiful day, and it was.
Usually we have 117 degrees by now.
Well, I live in Lodi, so it's similar.
You got it.
Very similar.
You didn't have any trouble finding us.
No, no. Google Maps.
Bless the GPS.
Google Maps. No, but as I was coming up on it, I said, I wonder if it really is there. But it was. I came right to it.
So while we're waiting, can you just ask a question? Are you,
Sure.
are you an educator?
I am. Yeah, I am. My resume is in the packet that we gave to you. My background is 38 years in California public education. I was a math and physics teacher at Elk Grove High School.
El Toro.
Elk Grove.
Elk Grove.
Oh.
South of in Sacramento County. Yep.
My daughter went to El Toro.
And I was a, hello there. Hi, Peter. Nice to meet you. I left you one of our presentations.
We promised, we promised to wait till you returned, but then there was a question as to where he grew up or where he started his career, how he got going.
Don't worry.
Just begin. So my name is Bill Hewitt, and I was a public educator for 38 years. 22 of that in Elk Grove Unified School District. That school district was 10,000 when I got there. Today it's 65,000 students. Isn't that something? So it offered a lot of opportunity. I was also a high school administrator for 14 years there, mostly as a principal.
You are part of the Thundering Herd.
I was part of the Thundering Herd. I was the principal at Elk Grove High School. Won the first section championship in football when I was there.
My daughter taught there for 2 years.
Oh, she did? What's your daughter's name then?
You would have left it. Hannah Bernowski,
Okay. The name is a little, do you remember when she was there?
past 2 years.
Okay, yeah.
And the superintendent, during your years, it went on to be the Sacramento County Superintendent.
Dave Gordon, great colleague of mine. I worked side by side with him when I was assistant superintendent for secondary, and he was for elementary. He and I are great friends still. To this day, we do things together. Yeah, thank you. I'll let him know that his accolades are known here as well as around the state.
Strong accolades.
Yeah. Great person. Yeah, very fine educator. Great.
Glad you got to work with him.
So also then I was a superintendent for 16 years in Dixon. My first superintendency, a nice town about 3,500 students in the town. I was there for 4 years. Then Lodi Unified School District, where I live now, I was there for 8 years and did a lot of school construction during my time there. And then Berkeley at the end. And I was at Berkeley for the last almost 5 years of my career. Last 6 years I've been retired, sort of. I've been doing this. I currently am the California coordinator for McPherson and Jacobson. I've done 15 searches, all sorts of districts, from Elk Grove to as small as districts of 300 students. And I really enjoy this. This is kind of my giving back exercise, if you will. I think most of us, I know all of the consultants who are talking to tonight, I think, and we all do it as a labor of love, I think. We do it to serve and to give back to school districts. Other things that I do in retirement is I have been an interim superintendent in 2 districts. I also mentor superintendents and work with boards of education for a number of different agencies. So I work in the area of governance and protocols and superintendent evaluations of all things. So pretty active. Well, tonight what I'd like to do, and I'll try to keep on my target time here, is I'd like to talk to you about our firm and about why we are a little different, to give you sort of some alternative, if you will. I want to first start by saying I know the other firms. I actually worked for one of the other firms for a couple of years and came to this one because of the nature of this firm. And I want to tell you that all of the firms have excellent people and have very good processes and do a good job for you. I really want to commend our competition and especially the superintendents that are working for you. Mike Escalante and the fellows that you're going to see afterwards were all excellent superintendents and very fine educators. So you won't go wrong, I don't think, with any one of the firms. Your task is to find the one that's going to fit your needs, in my opinion. And the uniqueness of McPherson and Jacobson is that we are very focused on engaging your community. And our RFP really emphasizes that. That's the first thing, is how are we going to engage your community? We go the extra length, and I do especially go the extra step to make sure that we engage your stakeholders throughout the process. And as I talk to you about the process tonight, you'll see that we work for you. We will set up the search the way that you want, but we will recommend certain things based on our corporate culture, if you will, and our mode of doing things, which is to engage your community a lot in the process. We actually have 3 different ways to run a search. I've done all 3 ways with different school districts. One's the traditional way, where we take input from stakeholders, and then you go ahead and interview, and we check the candidates out before you interview, and that's kind of the traditional format. Nothing wrong with that at all, but it's a little bit closed, if you will. It's a little bit closed to participation. Another way to do it is to have a completely open system where every aspect of the search is an open search with a public present and maybe even engaged in it. And I've done that with some school districts, and it's worked out just very well. You may want to do that. The one that I've done most of the time, and that we do most of the time here in California, is what we call a confidential search with stakeholder input. And it's a search that we go ahead and recommend to boards in California because the reason that we are endorsed by CSBA went out 6 years ago and interviewed all the firms and picked this one, which at the time was not doing searches in California, which I think is kind of interesting. And they picked this one because boards of education were saying the biggest issue that we have with searches is credibility with our communities and with our stakeholders, that we're being criticized for doing things in the dark or in back rooms. And McPherson Jacobson, their whole theme is transparency, and we like to add engagement to that as well. And the way that we suggest that you do a search is still in a confidential way, but including your stakeholders, not only in getting information, but also actually in interviewing the candidates and in giving you direct feedback about those candidates during the search process and the interview process. So I'm going to go forward and talk about our process from the beginning to the end. But first, I want to talk a little bit about our successes, both here in California and in the nation. This is one of the 3 largest search firms in the country. We've done over 700 searches nationwide. I think we're in 38 states right now. We have 120 different consultants, 15 here in California. The national part of the firm, to me, isn't all that important. It's nice to know that we have all that kind of support, got a great home office, and super staff, and we get a lot of exposure. What's really important, though, is what happens here in California. As I mentioned to you, I'm the California coordinator, so I make sure that all of our searches are done by folks that are engaged either in that area or similarly with that school district. The other consultants, and unfortunately neither of them can be here tonight, and I know that's a detriment to us, but Marilyn Shepard is going to be on this. Her resume is in the packet, and she is a consultant in this district. She has worked in this district, knows the district very well, and lives just over in the Central Valley in the Fresno area. The other person will be Aida Buelna. And Aida is a well-known Latina educator in California. She was a superintendent for 9 years in Esparto, very well thought of in with Latino educators throughout the state. So the 3 of us will be doing this search. We'll kind of figure out as we go along who does what and how we do it. But we like to put a lot of consultants at your disposal to do this work of engaging your community. The first thing that we do is we go ahead and establish a criteria with you for what you're looking for in a superintendent. Now, this is something that we personally tailored to your school district. We ask that you have people in the audience maybe that can give you some feedback into that, but we are a criteria-driven agency. We use this criteria to recruit candidates. The candidates actually have to write to the criteria. They have to tell us, how they meet that criteria. And then when you interview, your questions are geared to it. And even when you select your finalist, we'll ask you, how does this person meet your own criteria? We keep this criteria to 5 or 6 paragraphs and sentence areas and focuses. And that helps in bringing a good focus to the candidates, and it really helps in getting the right match between you and the candidates. Sometimes we have very fine candidates, but they're just not the right person for this district. We find that out through establishing a strong criteria. We also, in the first phase, if you could look at page 9, is a nice outline of our process. We also establish a timeline. I'm curious if I could ask what your timeline is. What do you envision your timeline?
Yesterday.
You're looking to have a superintendent as soon as possible?
December-ish.
Okay, all right. Because we can follow any timeline, but I'm sure everybody's told you this is a real tough time right now to begin a search because schools are just started and it's the toughest time. I've done it before, and we've done it on as short a timeline as 2 months and as long a timeline as 8 months. So it really depends on what you want to do and how comfortable you feel with your interim situation or your temporary situation. So we'll work to do whatever you feel comfortable in doing. And I tell boards, sometimes boards say, well, we can't go out right now. I tell boards, give it a try because we're with you. We're with you until you find a superintendent. There have been searches where I've gone out late in the year. Glendale was one of them. And I came back to the board and I said they wanted only a sitting superintendent. They were pretty specific in what they wanted. And I came back and said to them, I don't think any of the candidates that are available here in August are going to meet your criteria or going to meet your needs. I was very honest with them. And I said, here are some that we thought are good candidates, but I just don't think these are the ones that, are going to meet your criteria. And so they looked at them and they agreed, and we decided to go out 4 months later, and they have a great superintendent now. So that's what we do. And it was at no extra expense. It still was all within the framework. If in fact that's the case, because we have to go out at a difficult time, and we have to do it twice, then we'll do it twice. Second phase is community input. Now, the community input, we'll talk a lot with you about how you wish for us to do that with you. We will conduct in this district sessions in Spanish. We'll conduct sessions in both languages. And we'll conduct them any place that we can find stakeholders that will gather together to give us input. We ask 4 questions. One is, what's good about your community? What's good about your school district? What are the issues facing your school district? And that's the tough question, is getting those issues out. And we want to let you know that we are transparent and open about the issues. We all have issues. I've got them, every institution has them, and we have to hire a leader, that can deal with those issues. That's a big reason why you have a superintendent, is to work on the issues that you have. So we always try to ferret out those issues with your stakeholders. And then the last question is kind of the traditional one. What's, what are you looking for in a superintendent in terms of characteristics, traits, attributes, and specific skills? Some places need a really strong person in finance. Some places need a really strong person in curriculum. Some places they're really trying to reform their personnel practices. And some need, somebody who can do all of those things and lead a staff that can do them well. So we ask that of as many different venues as we can. When we were in Elk Grove, we had 64 different meetings that we attended to gain input, and a document that was 150 pages when we were done. Now, what do we do with that? That's what's maybe a little bit different. I think everybody does some stakeholder input, but what we do with it is unique. We actually publish it. We ask you to put it on your website. We use it with the candidates and tell the candidates that you need to do your homework. You need to look at this and read this, because the board is going to ask you about this. So we get very involved with what your stakeholders have said and put forward, and we encourage you to ask questions in regard to what you found in the issues portion of the stakeholder input. And this is fairly unique with us. Most places don't do that. We also have a survey that asks the 4 same questions. So if somebody cannot be at one of our meetings or we can't make contact with, we go ahead and say, here's how you do it online, and we publish all of that as well. I just want to give you one example of the length that we go and correct one thing that's in this national bulletin. We do things a little differently in California, and I'm the coordinator of California, so I insist on it. We don't charge extra if it takes extra days to do it here in California. They have, I think I saw that in your flyer, and they haven't updated the California portion of this. I mean, if it takes, I've been on many searches where we've gone far past 2 days of input, and we never charge more than the fee for that. So there is no limitation on how much input we do. In one district, I really like this. We asked, how can we, get parent input? This was in Parlier, a district about 3,500 in the outside of Fresno. And they said, well, our parents usually come early in the morning, to drop their children off, and they come with their babies and they hang around for an hour. That might be a good time. So, every morning that week we got up and we met with the parents between 7 and 8:30 in the morning, and we got great input from it. So that's the kind of example about the lengths that we'll go to hear from your parents and to give you feedback about what you're looking for, about what they're looking for. As you can tell, that's a really important part of our process, is the input that stakeholders give and how we use it. In the area of reference checks, we go ahead and do a 3-deep reference check. We're very thorough about that. And then we have your final candidate. We actually get a professional organization to do a complete check of records, academic records, fiscal records of the candidate, and then also the criminal records of the candidate. Your finalists will be thoroughly vetted, but we vet all of them for you. We bring to you, after we recruit and encourage people to apply and check them out, we bring to you a short list of candidates that you examine and decide who you're going to interview. Now, I want to spend some time talking to you about the interview day, because that is completely unique with this company. Nobody does it this way but us. We have an interview process where we only interview 2 or maybe 3 candidates a day. We tell the candidates that they're going to be with us all day long, and we tell you that you're going to be with us most of the day as well. The day starts at 7:30 or 8 in the morning with breakfast with a couple of you. With each candidate, and then coffee with, we rotate the candidates and the board members. Then in the morning, they will interview 1, maybe 2 panels of stakeholders. And that would be representatives from your community, your teaching staff, your classified and administrative staff, and parents. And students too, if you wish to have a student or two on the panel. Then you have lunch with a candidate or two, that you may not have met. And then by the time the afternoon rolls around, then you interview, do the kind of traditional interview of the candidate. We also ask for a writing sample. Now, the reason we do all of this is, one, so that you know the person as a person before you have to interview them. We have found business doing this for years and years, having a social component to the interview process. And we have found that boards really like this process. We'd encourage you to check us out with our districts that we've used this full process with. Boards have been very happy with it. And it leads to having a long relationship with your superintendent. We're very proud that 80% of our placements are still in their job after 5 years, both in California and nationwide. And we think it's because of using criteria and using this, using a lot of stakeholder input and using this social component that really make a difference in getting a really fine match with the school board and with their community. Now, when we finish with the day of the interview, we'll bring dinner in, or days, okay? Usually it's 2 or 3 days of interviews. We'll bring dinner in and ask you then to read all of the comments that your stakeholders wrote. And we will have a facilitator that's worked with your stakeholders to determine the strengths and the concerns of each candidate. Now, when we do that, we talk to the stakeholders and say, you know, your job is not to tell the board who to hire. That's their job. You don't prioritize. You don't say this is our top candidate, and you don't rank order them. You don't do any of that. But what you do is you let the board see the candidate through your eyes, through your lens. And so we spend time with the board asking you to read all those comments that they do, and then to hear the consensus that the whole group had about the candidate. And I'm really pleased with how that works with boards. Boards really get a great perspective before you deliberate. We ask you to withhold your deliberation for a while until you hear from your constituents and what they thought about each candidate. And then we go through a process where we look at each candidate and we look at the strong strengths and weaknesses of each candidate, and we stack those up against the criteria and make a selection. If you want to visit the candidate in their district, that's fine. If not, then that's okay too. We really don't recommend that one way or the other. It's kind of up to the school district. We actually find that after the process we've been through, it's a bit superfluous to go out and visit them in their own district. But some school boards like to do that, take people with them. The last phase we have, not all agencies do this, but we do. We're really trying to guarantee success with you. So we actually come in and work with you and the superintendent to set the goals and the success criteria for the first 6 months or a year, whatever you choose. We usually come back a month or two later and sit down with you and say, what are the short-term successful goals that you have? We want to see you and your board do some very successful things right at the beginning of their tenure, and for them to meet your criteria from the beginning, so they get off to a great start. And that actually is part of your guarantee of if it doesn't work out with the superintendent, then we'll come back and do the search again for just expenses within a 2-year period of time. Unfortunately, we haven't had to do that too often. We have had to do it. Not every search. We've done 35 searches in California. I think we've had to encounter that twice. So, you know, we want to be clear that sometimes a search just doesn't turn out the way that you want it, but we have a very high track record of success, and I do especially. So, you know, we're very pleased with our process. I want to emphasize as I close here that there's some unique things about McPherson-Jacobson, and it is why CSBA endorses only our organization for searches. The first one is that use of criteria. So important to be very clear about what you're looking for to get a good match. The second one is this idea of transparency, of getting input from your stakeholders and involving them in that. And then the third one is the personal relationship you form with your candidates as you interview them, that social component of it. We think that these components are unique, and the way that we do them are unique to our firm, and it leads to superintendents staying 5 years or more, which is our goal, stability. Thank you. I'll be glad to answer any of your questions.
What did you say Ida's last name was?
Buelna, Buelna, Buelna.
Question?
So you personally would not be involved?
I would. I think the three of us would come to your board meeting and talk about how do we do this search. Yeah, no, I personally would be involved with it. All three of us would. Now, not all three of us would probably be here all the time together, but you'd see a lot of me. I'd be an equal partner with the other two consultants. Yeah.
Then I get confused in your material because you say that you don't represent candidates, but you keep a database of quality candidates. What I'm most concerned about when I read statements like that, especially where it says you have 900 potential applicants currently registered, is I want to make sure that a search is done, and
right.
It isn't just, the same people that you're recycling.
Right. I'm glad you asked that because I didn't go into that because of time limitations. But let me spend a little bit of time with that. I think that's a real critical question, Robert. So yeah, I mean, we have a national database of 900. That's at least 900 candidates that have applied. And I did 4 searches last year, and I've done 15 over the last 5 years. And I'm very engaged with superintendent circles in California. I was an officer with the Northern Cal Superintendents Organization, which is the organization most superintendents join, city superintendents, and been to CSBA and the city and the superintendent symposium every year, and not to brag, but well known in Northern California especially. So I would say of the superintendent's place during my 15 searches, I've recruited half of the ones that were placed. I want to give you a good example. In Elk Grove, they came to us kind of late, and we really had, Bob Ferguson and I did it, and we really had to go out and recruit hard, and we recruited the current superintendent there. I remember both of us kind of double teaming him, saying, Chris, you can do this job, you need to apply, and he wasn't going to apply at all. So that's a big part of my job, actually, in this search, is to get out there and see what your criteria is and to go find candidates for you. And I spent a lot of time, on the phone, working the phones and talking to all my colleagues about, who's available and who's out there. Now, I want to mention something to you in the spirit of transparency, that if we go out in September or October or even November, we're going to be looking mostly at assistant superintendents, not because we want to or not want to, but because of the reality of the time of the year. Assistant superintendents can move almost any time of the year. They're not as wedded to their school district as a superintendent is. And superintendents that are available at that time, unless they have just said, gosh, I always wanted to do Hollister, and that there may be some of that, and they weren't in the market and they said, I can't let this opportunity pass me by. There could be some of those, but not so much in the fall, okay? Not so much in the early fall, especially. So as we go out and recruit, we're going to be spending time hitting different markets of highly qualified administrators at depending on the time of the year that we go out and recruit. And all of us, myself, Marilyn, and Aida, will be out there recruiting using our different networks. Aida's got a great network with the Latino administrators in California, as well as others. Aida did the search in both the Soledad and in Alisal, and another one somewhere around here, I can't remember where, but she's done several searches in this area. So the reason I'm bringing her into this search, and I'm sorry that it didn't get into your packet, it really should have, is that she knows this area really well, and she knows the leadership in this area really well. So we'll bring Robert, we'll bring a lot of recruitment to this effort here. The 900, A lot of those are out-of-staters, and we'll get some people from out of state. I've only placed one out-of-state superintendent in California, and it was somebody returning to California. It was a great placement. So we look at them, we look at the out-of-staters, but frankly, most of our candidates that are successful on the short list are from inside the state. Not all of them. There's some great people that want to come to California, and we want you to have that exposure. You get a lot of free exposure with McPherson Jacobson. That is one of the bennies of having a national firm, because people check our website across the country, and we have a lot of people that, being one of the 3 big firms, a lot of smaller states, you have to go in a lot of different states. So there's a lot of candidates that will check the 3 larger national firms. Yeah.
Bill, did you say, I want to make sure I understood you correctly. You said you were, let's see, CSBA, that you were endorsed, or that you were the only firm? I thought endorsed.
Both. We're the only firm endorsed by CS. We are endorsed by CSBA, and we're the only firm that they have.
Only firm?
Yeah.
Anywhere?
Yeah. Yeah. They used to do searches, and they ran into some problems doing them themselves with quality, with having oversight of it. So then they stayed out of the business for 4 or 5 years, and then decided that they would pick one firm to be their firm that did it. And that's us. And they interviewed, my understanding is they interviewed everybody.
As I recall, not to debate this, but as I recall, they didn't endorse one or more. They had a long laundry list. They had 3 or 4 pages of firms that do searches, and it was up to you to vet, select, choose, the one that fits your district best.
Yes, it used to be that way. Yeah, but that was during that interim period where they didn't do that.
Okay.
But now they sponsor one firm to do it. And I don't think that I'm sure that they don't dissuade you from not using another firm. Every firm has its strengths and advantages, if you will, and good people doing them. So, but they wanted to, they really, from what Vernon Billy tells me is, who was before Vernon? Getting older, Who's my memory? Anybody remember who was before Vernon?
Before Vernon Billy,
wasn't Cunningham, was it? No, I can't remember. Can't remember the fellow, but I remember his face. But both of them said that the reason that they needed a firm, they needed to recommend somebody, is because of the concerns that they were getting from boards about doing this in isolation and doing this behind closed doors, that they were getting a lot of complaints about that. And I think that's why they picked this firm, because there are a lot of other good firms, and certainly there were firms that knew California better than this firm when we were picked. So, so the reason that this firm was picked was because of this notion of transparency and engagement with the stakeholders.
Thank you. The last question I have for you was that the superintendent search you did at Soledad, was that the person who chose the current superintendent that's there?
Yes.
Tim Vanoli?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Did you do the search prior to that?
No, we did not.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, we did not. Same with Alice Hall. Yeah. And sometimes, actually some of the searches, certainly not this one, but some of the searches that I go into, school districts are in crisis. That happens sometimes when we come in. The board and the superintendent are at odds, or something is really huge problems. And I don't sense that in Hollister. But that actually is the most rewarding type of a job. That happened in Alistair. We came in and they were kind of in crisis, and they've been very, very happy now with their new superintendent.
Alisal? Yeah. And they were under state administrator too.
Yeah, that's right. Well, a while back they were
administrator.
Yeah.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
So you say you don't pick applicants, and I believe you.
Yeah.
But how do you ensure? Basically, my question is, how do you ensure before applicants get disqualified that there's consensus, that there's actual discussion?
Another great question. I can tell you all are doing a very conscientious job of this. So we, in our vetting process, will go through all of the applicants, and we will have asked you what the criteria are, and then also what some of the requirements are. You may want somebody who's been in a cabinet level position. I usually think that's a good idea for a district this size. You may want somebody who's bilingual. You know, that may be something that you think is a requirement. It may not be. Whenever you do that, you limit your scope of candidates. So our first pass through the candidates is looking at those requirements to see if they meet them. And if they do not, then we rule them out at the first pass. And then we make a number of inquiries on the rest of the candidates. Typically, it runs like this, and every search is different. So yours won't be exactly like this, but typically we get about 30 applicants for a job. Sometimes more, sometimes less. Not very seldom less, because we get a lot of applicants. And we recruit to get a lot of applicants. And typically we'll make a first pass through it, and some of those will be out of state, some will not have met your basic requirements. And oftentimes that list gets cut in half in that first pass. And then we look at that 15 and we start calling on them and checking them out and seeing what the situation is with each of them. And the stronger candidates then we can discern. And then we say, is this candidate a right candidate for this school district? And we bring those forward to you. Now we encourage you to look at all of the candidates electronically through their information. We give you the materials about 4 or 5 days in advance to look at them. And then when we come in to review the candidates with you, we say, here's our short list, but we want to talk to you about every candidate on the list. So when we come to you to talk about what candidates you're going to interview, we go down through the whole list and tell you why we're not recommending certain ones. And I've had boards that have said, you know, we really like this one, let's bring this one in, and we do. Yeah. So that's how that process works.
So this usually happens with time, right? We have plenty of time to.
Yep. Yeah, actually we need quite a bit of time that night. Yeah, I mean, that's the one thing I want to say is that our process is not a simple one or an easy one. It takes more board member time, to be honest with you. It does. And you have to be able to commit to us 3 board meetings. And the third one especially, it probably should be a special meeting where we we're just meeting together because we're going to be talking about the candidates, the interview process. It also requires that you engage with us about who you want for us to work with, your stakeholders. And then if you follow our recommendation, if you use our confidential stakeholder panel, we have to work to build those panels, and you have to appoint those panels. So we put a lot into this, and I won't be shy about saying it's more work for the school district, but it's the most important thing you do. It's the most important thing you do. So we feel that work is really worth it. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Great questions. Very good questions.
Any other questions?
You got any questions on the fee? I want to talk just a second about it if I can. So there's a fee and then there's expenses. Those expenses are the outside parameter of expenses. I doubt they're going to be, I think they're $5,000 or $6,000 of expenses. And they're not going to be that much. Marilyn and I don't live far from here. There won't be very much expense from us. We'll recommend that you advertise locally, not nationally. We won't charge for additional days here. So my guess is that those expenses will be around the $3,000 level. So that might help you a little bit if you're looking at the cost of search.
I think Marilyn should pay us for coming out.
Yeah, there you go.
Cooler weather. She was just here 2 weeks ago doing an in-service.
Yeah.
And
oh, she was, so you know her.
And it was right during the height of the fire.
Yeah.
In the valley. She said, it was so pleasant coming over the summit of the Pacheco Pass and coming down to this fresh air.
Yeah. Well, Marilyn sends her regards. She had a family obligation tonight, and we oftentimes, I don't know, you probably gave the school district or the agency notice, but consultants tend to get the notice a little bit late in all of these firms. So she could not be here tonight. And then it was my decision with Aida to include her. On this. I think you'll really want to have Aida in on the search with us. So we wish you the very best. And again, I know that your selection will be what meets your children's needs. Our motto is it's all about the kids. And from a board standpoint, you want to have a good leader to work with your kids and a good process to find that good leader. So I wish you the best and the best of success.
So thank you very much.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
It's nice talking to you tonight.
Likewise.
Thank you.
Take care.
Eric has gone to summon the last team.
Say it again.
Erica has gone to summon the last, I'm sorry, my voice is a little gone today.
Their leadership associate, association,
Associates.
it says associates here, but association,
There's the
associates.
associates.
Carol, can you conduct the search for us? Pardon me? Can't you conduct the search for us?
It's not my core competency. I just tell people I don't do searches. I've never done it professionally like this. I've never done the searches. I
I'm
think,
sure you've spread the word.
well, I was telling somebody today, I think I've gone through around 70 researches that were within my purview. I've seen a lot of searches. I've seen those that worked and those that didn't. And we were just talking about El Salvador. Shortest one that was 20 days.
That's right.
That lasted.
Yeah.
Yes. Good evening.
Good evening. Hey, how are you?
Good to see you, gentlemen.
Hey, Bill, how are you? It's good to see you.
Good to see you
Yeah,
again.
yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Years ago in Monterey. That's supposed to be.
Been a little while. Thank you guys so much.
Sure.
The board.
Let's go shake it up.
Thank you.
Good man, Lou.
Thank you.
I'm Mel, Liz Martinez. Nice to meet you. Thank you.
Elsa
Rodriguez.
You get double time. We get ready to move the water.
How you doing? Nice to meet you. Good to see you.
Hi, Fred. Elizabeth Martinez. Thank you.
Where are you from?
And how are you?
You look familiar for some reason.
Well, I've been around.
Are you an actor?
Yeah.
It could be that.
I was president.
That's it. Nice.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, thanks for joining us and thanks for waiting a little bit. I saw you walk across the parking lot there and thank you for your patience. We're pretty much right on time.
Great.
And as you know, we're in a situation where we have an interim superintendent, some retiree that comes in and hold the thing together, as you guys know. Well, but the board is interested in, getting the process started. They've had a lot of discussions about good time, bad time, all that, but they said, if they don't consider it, now they'll never know. So we're in the process of talking with superintendent search consultants, and your proposal came in, and it's very interesting, and we want to talk with you.
Great.
So the timeline of it is, we expect that you present maybe for 20 minutes, and then give us 10 or 15 minutes to ask questions, and we'll go from there.
I feel your pain because you've been sitting there since 5 o'clock.
Yeah, we'll do the best we can.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Phil Kwan. I'm the lead consultant for this project, and 40 years in public ed, last 19 as Superintendent Union School District in San Jose and Cupertino Union School District.
We're trying to figure out with the space here, we don't want to be jumping over each other here, so.
We shouldn't have put that row of chairs there.
That's okay.
That's all right.
Fred Van Leuven, he has me a little bit longer as a superintendent. I was a superintendent for only 12 years in the Santa Barbara area. Just left WASC, the president of WASC, the organization that accredits schools. So when your kids leave and go to the high school, in order for them to get into college, they have to be accredited by WASC. And so that was the organization that I oversaw. We do more than we did. I said we, didn't I? And I still we. We did more than just high schools, but we do elementary schools and middle schools too as well. So we align. That's just another secret part.
So we know you've been sitting here for a while, and so we know that you have our packet of information. What we're going to do this evening, very briefly, is to tell you about how we're different from most of the other search firms that you've seen tonight, and hopefully you understand our passion for the work that we do.
So this page is just showing that we've done our homework for you, and the things that we've we picked up on. And they're, again, a summary. Obviously, you've had some schools that have been recognized. And you also have some instructional issues that you've worked on and developed mission and vision statements. The part I think that's interesting, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about, is attempting to seek the resolution with your peace issues with the county. Both of us have had experiences of those things before with outside organizations, and you're the advocates for that as you're trying to figure out whatever it is. And I think that's a significant accomplishment. You have to stand up and be engaged with those kinds of things. So just letting you know that we know about that part.
So our firm has been in business since 1996. We've done over 385 searches, give or take, since then. Just a listing of some of the searches nearby that we've done. And there is a list of all of the searches that we've done since 2013. So for the last 5 years, it's sitting in your proposal packet. I'd like to tell you that we're a California-based firm. All of us are California superintendents, but we do have a national reach. We do place superintendents from out of state. One thing that we do encourage boards, if they are looking out of state, is to ensure that the new superintendent coming in has a support system to get them through all of the myriad of things that we deal with and Bill has dealt with in California Public Education Code.
And one of the other issues is we have the most searches of any search firm in California. The part, and that may be significant, the part that really is more important is when people get placed in the last 5 years, I think it's 2013, 84% of those superintendents are still there. That means that there's been not only a marriage from a board standpoint, but from a superintendent standpoint. So there's been a good relationship, so they've renewed contracts and those kinds of things. So that's pretty significant. Some of those 84, the people who weren't in the 84 only were contending on sticking around for 3 years, and so they had a 3-year contract, or we had a couple of people get ill, but those are the things that happen. But we've had a strong record with people being able to continue.
We talked about our firm being 14 former superintendents. We're all vested in the company. We don't contract our work out. We do all of our work in-house. We have regular meetings amongst ourselves whenever we're doing searches, especially during the height of the season. And I know for some of you, these are important organizations that all of our membership is either in or out right now. Going from AASA to CALSA to AXA, we're all members of AXA. Suburban Schools, Collaborative for Education Reform. And then there are many of our partners who are affiliated with universities, Azusa Pacific, Casper Fullerton, and the University of Southern California. One of the things we'd like to just highlight for you tonight, and there is a full process in your packet, is about the process that we feel has made us successful. And the first part is getting an in-depth candidate profile, working with you at a meeting to determine what those characteristics are that you're seeking in your next superintendent. Their personal characteristics, their professional characteristics, those are the things that are going to make this person be the match for Hollister School District. The other thing we'll do is we'll come out and we'll work extensively, bless you, with all of your constituent groups, your staff, your community members, your parents, your support groups in the schools. We will be here getting community input. We also have an online survey which we offer, which a lot of people take advantage of because everybody's so busy today that it's easier to provide input through an online survey. And we'll begin to pull together a position profile for your district so that when we're ready to go out looking and to go out recruiting, we have this template, so to speak, who we're looking for. And it's pretty specific. A lot of people think that the position profile is pretty standard. It is really not. It is developed for your district, and you'll let us know if we're right on or not, and we'll make those tweaks and approve it before we put it on our website, before we actually put it on your website.
So we're going to point out some of the differences. This next part is the recruitment campaign and outreach. We've actually already cheated and started telling people about this job being open, even though we don't have it. So I've talked to two deputy superintendents, I've talked to a couple of superintendents, some of them aren't that far around here. So regardless of how this rolls out, your name's getting out there, and I know you're gonna want to, I believe you're gonna want to find somebody really quickly. So we started the process, just so you know that. As Phil said, it's us, and I'm gonna show you another slide in just a second of what's different about us, but we're so connected with not only our partners, but other people outside of that we do very heavy reference checks, and we will not just talk to people who they give to us, but we'll be 3 or 4 down. We don't hire consultants to go do any of that work. We don't hire a third-party company to do it because we do it as our work. That's how we're responsible for this. We will use other ways to make sure that we're accurate, but that's our responsibility. That's what's really important. So we go out, we find the world wants to come here and work. And the other part that's different is after we've gone through this and vetted everybody, you will see everybody who submitted an application. We're not holding anything back. That's another thing that's different. And we will work with you. We will tell you who think we've gone through this process, so we get an understanding both from what your viewpoint is and everything that we've heard about what the profile is looking like. We will say what we think in terms of the match. And if you think there's some other people that you want to throw onto the table for conversations, then we have that conversation. That's different than a lot of other folks. And then once we've decided that, we get the interviews setting up and we help you go through that process. We are with you through the interviews. That's also different. And that's another piece of that. So we start off in the beginning and we're there all the way to the end. We're not going to go on if you decide to go on a tour of their home facility, we're not going to go with you. You guys can have that experience. But we'll help you get everything set and work with you through that part too.
Now, the interview panel, I know with the last search, we actually did we had separate panels. We had community members, staff members do certain questions that are already developed by your firm. And so they go through that process and then they come to us. So do you have a standard process as far as when we interview, or are there tweaks that can be made?
Well, first of all, let me tell you about the interview questions. They will be developed with you in mind.
Okay.
So we will work with you to make those interview questions available to the committees. I have to tell you that we do our best work when we have confidential searches. And by confidential, I mean you're the board. You represent your community. You know your constituents. And so we would go down the pathway with you on having a confidential search. Having said that, it's important to know that if you choose not to do that and you want to do some sort of hybrid of that, we'll work with you on that. But we also give you the caveat that you may lose some sitting superintendents who don't want to have their name out there. And as trustworthy as any committee that you could put together, there is that one bit of hint of hesitancy on a sitting superintendent who isn't working directly with the board. So, but let us work through that with you if you think that that's important. We've done that a couple of times, but that is not our MO. We do want confidential searches because we think we get the best candidates.
Thank you.
So this is the other part that really makes us different. This is the state of California, obviously. These are all partners. They're not consultants. We're not hiring other people. This is the group that does the searches. And these are all folks that every 2 weeks have a conversation about the jobs that are opening, who might be good candidates that maybe not everybody knows. If we're doing reference checks, who might know somebody who knows where that person has worked. So there's a huge, that's a huge change in some of the other organizations. We'll bring a couple people in, maybe locally. We're connected throughout the state, and you saw some of the connections that we had on the earlier slide.
I think the most important piece about this slide is the fact that we have conversations, as Fred said, every 2 weeks. And it's important for us to hear from some of our colleagues in the firm who may have interviewed somebody, who may not have gotten the job, but boy, are they stellar candidates. And that we know about them immediately so that we can go out and recruit them if they're not geographically honed in on one area or another.
So I can offer an advertisement right now. Santa Clara Office of Education is looking for a business person. Could be somebody interim or somebody that wants to go for the job. So we know that because one of our partners is working with Santa Clara, and those are the kind of connections that we have.
You would not announce that in front of Gabe and appreciate, oh, he's not.
He's not here.
Put earmuffs on.
I've never been happy that somebody got ill, but today I.
Yes.
Good timing on our part.
Yes.
I think you get the point, it's the kinds of things and how connected we are.
So it's essentially an internal network that you're keyed into.
Yeah, I would say that.
Well, it's our network of
Yeah.
partners who have those tentacles out there with the different organizations that we all represent.
So if I can rephrase, if you permit me, that while your partners, which are chosen to do this, you two or whatever, doing a local search, and of course you advertise it statewide, but you reach out to all your partners to see who they know in those
We do.
areas that might be interested,
We
and they
do.
make personal contacts.
Because we can't see everybody. And there may be some stellar candidates in SoCal that, are willing to relocate, haven't thought about it, and we know about them immediately. So, thank you.
So another way of looking at it is you have two of us that are committed to this board, but you also have other folks that are also committed to this board. We're the ones going to be in the middle of it, but we're all working together on all searches, trying to help people find things and connections. And we're going to talk, the other thing that makes us different, I think Phil's got this one, where we have some training that we do with superintendents and assistant superintendents. So that's another different point about us. We'll get to this one.
There might be the perfect person up there in Ukiah that
Good.
might want to come to host.
You never know.
You're Jim Brown.
You never know.
Busy these
Yeah.
days.
Yeah.
I noticed way up there in the northern coast corner of California.
Yep.
Yeah, Jim's having a field day up there.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to whip through this there so we make sure you have enough time.
Just again, reminding you of what are the distinguishing characteristics. We've done 385 plus searches. We're all vested in the firm. We're all former superintendents with very diverse backgrounds and experiences. We remain active in state and national organizations. We have a long-standing, deep relationship with a number of people in California who are sitting superintendents and below. And those are how we get information about some of the candidates we'd like to bring forward. I also want to tell you at this point in time, our leadership development side, which is a separate side of the firm, is just growing leaps and bounds. We are pride ourselves in bringing quality candidates to a district, but we also pride ourselves in supporting that superintendent either through our networks or mentor coaching, whatever that person needs to be successful. And I think you as a board recognize that in today's world, that's the kind of resources you want to support your superintendent with. The second to last slide for tonight is just talking about the different phases. All of these phases are in your proposal packet. Phase one is the initial meeting with the board. We're going to work with you to develop the distinguishing desired characteristics. We're going to talk about a timeline and talk about protocols. In phase two, we have a community input. There we'll be here working with your community, your staff, anybody you want us to make outreach to get input as to what they see as the next superintendent.
You're going to be the ones that know, so we don't leave anybody out in terms of that part. You know those groups.
Are you limiting the amount of time for that? Like,
Yeah.
what's, 3 days, 4 days, or?
Whatever it takes to get the community input.
Okay.
Yeah, there's two of us on this search. I think we'll do a good job getting good coverage in this district.
And bilingual outreach, will that be possible?
Well, I can tell you I'm not bilingual in Spanish, but I have worked with a member of your staff to have an ALD group, a bilingual group, so that we can get to your community and your constituents. We recognize that very
Okay.
important.
Yeah.
Yeah. The advertisement and recruitment process, as Fred said, we're recruiting now. And the reason we recruit now, I'm not beholden to who you pick to be your search firm. I'm looking at a district that I think someone should be applying to policy for. So I don't have any qualms about working with people right now recruiting for your school district. It's just not an issue for us. I know that. We'll work with you on making sure that it gets advertised and broadcast. We'll do the recruitment and we'll do the reference checking, very deep reference checking, so that you know when you get to our recommendations, they are people who are just quality. And speaking of quality, when you select your finalists, our goal, when you have your interview with, I'm just gonna make up a number, with 5 finalists, our goal is to make your job very difficult to pick one. That's how we operate. We don't throw ringers in just to make 5. We make sure that they're quality people. The interview process, we'll hold your hand through the whole process. We'll help you with the question development. We'll help you with phase 1 of the interviews, phase 2 of the interviews. We'll help you deliberate, facilitate that discussion so that you come up with a quality candidate that's a 5-0 vote. And if you're not all in agreement to begin with, you will be, because that's the only way that we can have a successful candidate come to Hollister, is when you have total agreement on the person that you're selecting. We'll work with you on the site visit. We'll work with you on the contract information that you will have to put into contract parameters that you should put into a contract working with your own legal counsel. I want to throw one other piece in here. I know a lot about Hollister, believe it or not. I live on the Central Coast right now. I retired from San Jose, went to Natomo, but in the last month and a half, my wife and I have been thinking about moving back. So we have visited Hollister. We've done our homework about Hollister. We're going to end up back in San Jose where our grandkids are. So it just worked out for us. But it's a great place. Bill knows that, I know. And we're just hopeful to get the search, number 1, but to also bring good leadership to your district. That's important for us.
So I can't top what you just said. I tried to. The only thing that I'm going to tell you is when you start another difference is you start looking at the cost. We give you one price. Many times as we're coming here, you're not paying for the fee for us to come up here. None of that stuff. We're doing the advertisements, that's all covered through this process. So that's one of the differences. And I think you guys are pretty savvy when you add up all the differences and things. When you see it, you'll probably see we are the most economical when you get to that point. Okay, this is the best slide of all.
It's the end.
Well, but it's also we're honored to be here. You know, this is the most important decision you're going to make, is finding your next leader. And it's important you find the right match that meets what you're looking for. And you have some good firms you're going to go through that process, and it's important you find a good match for what you guys need to do. We understand that. But we are honored to be able to be considered for this part, and we truly mean that. And the other part that we're going to say is we are fully committed to you. So while you're going through this part of it, we're not taking on any other searches. Pick us, we're going to be doing the search with you, and nothing else is going to get in the way from a search standpoint. So that's another thing that's different a little bit probably from others. Okay, this is your time for questions, and we were probably 2 minutes early, so that was our goal.
What is or do you have any experience about finding a superintendent off-season?
Yes.
The traditional season to be looking would be somebody to start at the end of the school year. But we're off-season.
I never view a search as off-season. I think there are a number of people who might be out there today who are sitting superintendents and assistant superintendents who would welcome the opportunity to come to Hollister, and who, based on our timeline, I think that would work, because they're opening school right now, just as you are. And so as a superintendent, I would be so committed to my district to ensure that the school year got off to a good start. Once it's off to a good start, and I'm thinking about moving to another district, and this is an opportunity for me, I think you'll be fine. This is not off season. I don't think there's any off season in the superintendent search world.
Other than allowing the time out of their current contract.
Correct. I think a lot of things have also changed because of the STRS changes that have happened. And we see superintendents that are leaving at very interesting times that are aligned to when their retirement package hits. And so there's things happening all the time. So there's a lot of activity we're seeing, and unfortunately we're going to see more because the whole administrative population is getting older, and we're seeing, you know, principals aging out, and we're seeing superintendents aging out and doing other things. So I don't think that's an issue. I think there's more mobility than perhaps in the old days when it used to be. You would think that, you know, the primary time.
And I can tell you, I was a classic example of off stream. I took my first superintendency on March 15th. So it's just the way it works.
So are you saying that technically there's variables that exist in the market today that could actually make this a prime time for the right candidate?
Sure.
Oh, I think so.
There are people, what makes this a prime time, and you guys may forget this, but you guys live here for a reason. There's people that want to have what you have. And you may not think that, but they want to come here and live here. And they want to be part of a community like this. So that's yeah.
But you're saying the crucial part too is that confidential part of it, as far as interviewing, that because of this unique time, that they don't necessarily want to announce to the world that they've come over here to interview and be potentially selected, you know, to be here. So that's part of the caveat that you're trying to make sure that we understand, because
yes, and the good news is you have an experienced superintendent long after we're gone that can probably even share more of that perspective. So
What, just a little further part to that question. What do you advise your candidates in terms of the confidentiality? I'm sure we all understand confidentiality through the application process, through the paper screening process, possibly even through the interview process. At what point do you tell a candidate that they no longer can keep this confidential? Is it the top finalists, or is it just the top candidate? Because obviously, if there's, say, 3 finalists, we're going to want to do reference checking on the top 3 candidates. Do you share with them that they're going to have to share with their board or their boss, if the assistant superintendent, at that point that they no longer can keep it confidential? If they want to be a finalist, they have to come clean with their district?
We always advise our candidates, once they're selected by the board to come forward for an interview, now's the time you need to tell your boss, whether it be your board or whether it be, you know, the person that you report to. Because we don't want people to think that we're taking people out from under them, when really they're quality candidates. They need to have the opportunity, but they really should be honest and forthright with their board or their superintendent.
and remember, we're going to be doing the reference checks, so we will have gotten deep into this. And on the form that we have, they check off, we can contact, they give permissions to talk people not on their list. So we have those kinds of conversations too.
And I just want to add one other thing about the off-season comment. If you think about it, if I were a sitting superintendent, I mean, I got bored after 13 years at Union, and I understand that. But if I were thinking about moving, this would be a prime time, because I get to come to the district and I have my input into the budget process. So important, because when you hire a superintendent, they come July 1, a budget's been sealed, signed, sealed, delivered, no input whatsoever. So it's a great opportunity for someone who's really forward-thinking.
Well, and also, you obviously know what's happening in this community with growth.
Yeah.
And you know where the future's going, you know, and you're seeing all these things. And that's a part where you get them on so they can start being engaged with some of those conversations. Especially as you're working through the county issues that you're working through right now, because that's obviously a big deal for the future.
right, and the other unique part is that for the November ballot, there's 3 seats for this board. So in that unique part of it is creating that input from those individuals. There's 6 running, getting some of their input. They will not, unless we do the voting in December when those new people are being sworn in, we just want to make sure that that transition is smooth, that their input has been also collected and included, as long as the community has had the opportunity, because they will not be able to go any deeper than that with interviews. But we want to make sure that we are soliciting those potential candidates, what they're looking for also in the superintendent and what they're gonna have to be working with.
So we'll ask you
Yeah.
for the names of those people and we'll make individual contacts with them and interview them individually. I think that's real important.
And you realize we put down a draft of what a proposed plan is. If it needs to be fast tracked, we have that ability to do it. We work with you, when you select this, we work with you that process to come up with the calendar so that everybody's all on the same page and it's well thought. So you can think of the things. I know you're getting hit with a bunch of proposals today as you're trying to figure all this stuff out, but that's what we're involved. That's what this is all about. We are actually your superintendent for a matter of moments in a singular task in which we're advising you to how to get to that point. And that's our function. So we've turned back into superintendent roles. That's why we like this thing, to be able to work with boards to try to help them get to that point.
I had one question on some of the language. I'm sorry if I may, Madam Chair. The part that we talked about the public and the public involvement, approval, and so forth. You say that you will assist the board and staff with a communication plan and other activities to support the approval of the new superintendent's contract. Can you explain that a little bit? What do you mean by you'll assist with the community? I'm not quite sure how you define that.
Well, when the board has selected a candidate to be the finalist, we'll work with the board and the finalists to develop a public information release. We'll also work with the board and the candidate to be sure that the contract parameters are within acceptable limits, because we won't bring a candidate forward who hasn't looked at your salary ranges, looked at your compensation package from the last superintendent. We want to make sure that there's no surprises at the end. And we do all of that up front so that when that person comes forward, either one of three people, and you choose that one person, you can almost guarantee that your contract will be signed with a little tweaking at the end.
And you won't violate any Brown Act. We'll make sure there will no be Brown Act violations in this process and when we go through this process.
So in the general process, do you offer, as part of the package, mentoring a new superintendent?
We do.
We could, yes.
If that's, we would recommend that someone have a mentor, especially someone who's coming up in the ranks as an assistant soup. One thing that I've always said, and Fred and I have talked about this, is that we want the person to be comfortable with their coach, and so we let them choose. You shouldn't be choosing a coach for your new superintendent. We let them choose. They need to be comfortable. They need to be able to share confidential information and to get off the ground running. So we hardly support a mentor coach for your superintendent, even if it's a sitting superintendent. There are things here going on, and Fred brought up the fact that your developer fees and mitigation fees, those are big deals. And some people who you may end up with might not have that as a background. So someone who can help them get through that process. I'm currently mentoring someone up in the Bay Area. I only do 2 mentors a year. I mean, I just want to be fair to the people that I coach.
There's a lot of moving parts.
Yeah, oh yeah.
So I was about to say, because there's a lot of variables, like Pat said, moving parts to what makes Hollister School District unique. You mentioned the litigation, but then there's also what Liz mentioned, which is the 3, possible new seats.
Of course.
And, consistency is really, really important to us as a district. I was even just thinking how, on Facebook, it kind of got a little bit blown out of proportion as far as the interim position, the salary. It's just
we read it.
The lack of understanding to a certain extent. The need to clarify what entails within the new superintendent position, how it's validated, right, and all the different measures that we use to be able to clarify to the public, so it's not just a talking point that gets a lot of emotion behind it.
We also work with boards, and especially when there's potentially a change that's that dramatic. There's a whole new culture that has changed, and making sure everybody understands what it means to be a board member and you're on the team, and the ins and outs of Brown Act and all the things that sometimes people don't understand, but those are what the rules are, and you guys understand them, and sometimes community members don't understand that. So we've done that. I'm coaching a board, doing a couple of workshops with them. We're waiting to see how the board election turns out, because there could be a dramatic change. And one that would be having a new board member, the other one having 4 new board members. So it's pretty different, you know, in terms of how you work together.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's when we start talking about the professional development we do, we're here to help. And there's 2 sides. There's a superintendent trying to learn to adjust to a board. There's a board trying to learn to that. And we've got a community that's in the middle of this thing too. So, and we understand that part.
Anything else? Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you for your
Thank you very
time.
much.
Thanks, gentlemen.
Thank you.
You guys travel safe, because it looks like fog.
That's good seeing you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Very good questions, by the way. We don't normally say that, but we just do.
Good seeing you.
Yep.
Okay. Now, next step?
Let's let her.
Yeah.
Well, you actually have 2 choices. I mean, this item is under discussion action, interview and discuss and take action. There's nothing in law that says you have to take action, but you do. There is something in law that says you have to take action in the public. So if you don't take it tonight, you have to take it next week. Well, I suppose, or sometime in the future. You wouldn't want to really delay it anymore. I guess what I'm saying is, if you feel comfortable about discussing it tonight and making a decision tonight, you have the right to do that. If you feel more comfortable about doing any further personal pondering or anything else that you want to do as a board member, you can either just discuss it and not take action on it, or not even discuss it and take action. You can feel that it was just necessary to interview. So you have 3 options, in other words. You've done the interview, you can interview and discuss, or you can interview, discuss, and take action. And that is totally up to you. In this kind of a case, it goes to selecting a board member for a vacancy. It goes to setting the compensation for a superintendent. It has to be done in public. And that's always a little bit awkward, because you want to say personal things about different individuals or people. But it's a process that has to be done in public, and the public feels it should be done in public. So it's your choice. I just wanted to give you the right to know that you don't have to be forced into something. But I did think you had great questions tonight, and I did think that you especially asked good questions around the pending board election too. That, you know, to these candidates, how long would the process take? How much would you involve candidates for a board position, et cetera? But that really doesn't affect the discussion, except you may or may not have liked the answers that one group gave you or another group regarding their support of involvement of it's not pending candidates, it's actual candidates. Right. After November 8th, we may know that it's actually board member elects. Right. So, you know, the extent to which you thought one group or another did, you can open the discussion. Madam Chair, you can take comments from anybody that wants to about what they liked or disliked, or who they thought was better or not. And if the group wants to move forward on nominating a group to have this bid, you can, and if you refer that to a week later, you can do that as well. So the floor is yours.
Okay, I would like to say that since we did not have the RFPs to view ahead of time, that I would like to read them before. I mean, we can discuss what we've heard tonight versus actually making a decision, because there may be something in there that is a definite turn off to someone. Or
Looking at what?
a real, I'm sorry,
Looking at what?
these.
Oh,
RFPs,
okay,
the actual details of the
contract,
proposal.
Because you didn't get them ahead of time.
right.
So that would be my suggestion. The other thing is, we might want, do you want to eliminate anyone from consideration to begin with so that we have less to read and digest?
If I could ask a question, would it be inappropriate to go into closed session to talk about conflicts of interest, things like that under personnel?
I don't know that it would be inappropriate if you felt there was a conflict of interest, you know, with a member of the personnel, somebody that's currently an employee. I think you could do that, but I don't. I guess I'm not seeing it, Rob. You probably have to maybe hit me over the head, but I kind of see what you're saying. But what I don't think it would be appropriate to go into closed session unless there was an obvious conflict of interest somewhere or something that existed that would be of a confidential nature that you would not want to discuss in public. That's a very fine line to walk. It's a very fine liability to cross, because the public, it's just like interviewing. If we had a vacancy on the board and you had 5 candidates that wanted to come to the board and you had to interview them in person, you can't discuss that in public. You have to discuss it right here. They each interview with you and they each answer questions, and then we go through this very awkward point of saying, well, I liked candidate number 1 and I like number 2. Well, I didn't like the way someone described education, you know, and it gets down to really saying, well, I'd like to make a motion to vote for somebody. And
Okay, you don't need to belabor the point, because, you know, my comments, I don't mind making, you know, in public. It just depends on whether we want to go through this tonight or not. I have strong opinions. Surprise, surprise. But, you know, if we wanted to start eliminating some firms, I'm ready to go, you know, with that. But,
and if I could throw my recommendation in for the process is, even if you wanted to take these home and search through them with a fine tooth comb, I think it would be healthy to have a discussion tonight so that you get a feeling of the opinion of others before you do all this. So you kind of get a lay of the land, so to speak, before you go home and do a lot of work and research, because it might be pretty clear. I mean, you might not need to go home and do all that research.
Right.
So that would be my recommendation, Madam Chair, is to at least let the board discuss, you know, how they thought it went. If they, you know, if they would only be considering 1 or 2, and you don't have to go into the detail of why you like this one or not. You don't have to do that. You can just say who you thought best met the match for this district. They each used that word, by the way. They didn't want to put each other down. They just said, we know you're interviewing other good candidates today, and we know you're going to have to find the best match. So I think that's a term you can use. But why you felt that one group would be a better match than another, I think it would be a healthy discussion. I think people are looking for that tonight.
Would you want to go through each one individually and give your opinion? I put little happy faces, unhappy faces, a straight mouth across when I wasn't swayed one way or the other. There were some things that I liked about one group versus something that I liked about another group.
It may not be necessary, Madam Chair. I mean, if we took a straw poll and we saw that 4 members really like number 2 best, whatever, then it's not going to really be necessary to go through the pluses and minuses of every presentation.
that's a good way to do it. Just to do that straw poll first.
That's what I would do. I would just take a straw poll and just ask each board member which team you like the best. And then you won't even have to worry about going through elimination and why, until it comes up extremely varied. Everybody likes something different, then we need to go through the process.
So, Rob, you will begin?
So, I did my rankings, each one, and, the first group comes up from one, each time for me.
Who does?
HYA.
HYA.
Okay. Is there anyone on the bottom of your list?
He doesn't have to go through that.
Doesn't?
I mean,
Yeah, let's see how we go.
Until we find out what the results
Listen, I
are.
will give a speech on each one, but let's just save time. Let's just see where other people are, and then I'll go through. How about that?
Okay.
I like number 2.
Number 2? The Texan?
Correct.
I think the unique part of certain parts of, like you said, there are some unique intricacies, and as far as the depth that they go, the unique part of the interface and the national exposure. But then again, you have the first and the last firm that are solid when it comes to California. They have their connections, they have their, their links into
Their network established.
their network established. So I don't know how important the national component is, having a firm that's out of California, mainly, to one that's more California based, even though HYA is also national. Is it national renowned or just?
No, this one's national. Jacobson.
These ladies didn't work. I thought they did have a national reach
Yeah,
and local.
They each have a national reach. Some have their local influence, but have national focus. That's, I think, how one of them even described it. They each will be on, they each will advertise electronically that reaches the entire nation. But most of their searches, as you can see from their references, are regional districts that have used them. This one said, I won't even mention to you. We'll base the search regionally or nationally, depending on the board's wishes. So there's,
Well, for me, the fact that this company didn't have all of their representatives kind of really did not,
That's what I wrote down.
didn't really, I want to know who the people that are going to be here representing us and are going to have that commitment from the very beginning, from today.
The second one goes down to Texas.
Yeah, and, I mean, he's very driven, very passionate. I also, as Peter, I did like the second one, just out of its uniqueness and approach.
But so that's JG.
Yeah.
My issue with them is, they let the salesman talk, and Michael is truly the educator. I mean, his background, to me, it was very, impressive. And he didn't include the resume under the third person, so we don't know who that is.
Dr. Unitas?
So, yeah.
But I'm thinking if he's the CEO, he should be the voice.
I think it's a very small company.
Well,
To be only doing one executive search.
That's right. Or for superintendent, at least.
they've done over 60. So if you're looking for balance, the first one's only done with 6. And then, granted, the last one has a lot more. But
Yeah, I think California's quirky enough that we need a California-based company.
That's what I like about the two HYA ladies is they're more or less local. And they know.
That's exactly what I thought. It is either them or the last guys, the leadership associate. But I did like that HYA.
Oh my gosh, Pat, you agree with me?
Yeah.
Can I jelly beans for can I put that down for a vote?
They're not
I'll go for it, HYA.
Well, you've each expressed your opinion about what you felt was the best interview and the person who would, or the persons of the team, firm that would best fit the needs for a search. Only 2 firms came up. 2 of you have expressed a desire for the first team, HYA, with Dr. Siri and Jackie, last name I can hardly pronounce. And 3 of you have expressed a vote for or concern for JG Consulting out of San Antonio, Texas, and San Jose. They do have a local office.
Regis doesn't count.
It's a way, is it?
Regis doesn't
It's
count.
kind of like a telecom.
There's a hotel room. All right.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Nice try there.
It's a ghost office?
Yeah, you rent it for the hour or the day or
Rent
whatever.
it.
Oh.
Show up.
Oh, okay.
Timeshare.
Yeah.
So it's not a permanent office for that.
Right. I agree just right.
I just like their process. That was the strongest point to me, but I could definitely default to the first one.
If you had to go for the first one.
You like the first one?
I did.
That would be my second.
Allison, your first pick would be number 1.
Yes.
Well, Madam Chair, just at the outset, it appears to me as though you have the top 2 teams that you looked at were number 1 and number 2. If you want to number them, HYA and JG Consulting. Sounds like 3 of you have a push toward the first HYA and express some of the concerns local to the local people and a number of other things. I guess at this point in time, now that we've laid out our best feelings, at least on the top, if you felt there was a need for further discussion between you, you can. Otherwise, you can see if the board could come to a consensus without the discussion. It's up to you.
Oh. Shouldn't we ask Gabe what the checking account looks like? You know, what do we have? What can we afford?
They're all these firms are
They're
very
all
close.
relative.
They're all within the same
Okay.
ballpark.
Yeah, if you go with
So there's
number
not a
1, we'll
significant-
bring the price down.
She said price matching.
Yeah.
Yeah, to me, that was
Walmart.
Yeah, it wasn't.
No, I don't want to take the lowest price.
No, that's certainly not a
No,
good idea either.
I want to get to the most for our money. And
Well, yeah, that's. At that point, it doesn't matter, basically. To Rob's point, it doesn't matter because we'll get the best price.
Madam Chair, I think we would need to address Trustee Hernandez and Trustee Martinez to see if they would feel all right with going with what the other 3 of you want. I know, I mean, it's a majority vote, but I think it's good to have a board have a consensus that they would support. You all know the democratic
My
process.
only other concern with the HYA was that they mentioned that they would only have 4 days to want to spend interviewing community, staff, union, whatever representatives, and I don't think 4 days is enough time.
I don't know that. Remember, we just did this 2 years ago.
I know, and Dr.
So we do have a list somewhere.
Dr. Oh my gosh, Cruz, yes, John Cruz.
From Stockton.
No, he's from the Valley.
Yeah.
It was what?
Stockton or Lodi or
Madera,
Modesto.
somewhere in there.
somewhere
But,
in the
I think for me, because, and even maintaining that confidentiality, but the biggest hurdle is to get through is doing this whole criteria building and being able to pull our, different representative groups, our CSEA, our teachers and our unrepresented, and plus all your community groups, and really get a good pulse as to what they're looking for. I mean, we will get our in-depth one-on-one interview with them, but I think part of building that criteria, and I think we were very successful the last time with building a really great criteria, was taking the time to get all of that from people.
I think it's very appropriate, not just to accept their proposal, but to say, we liked your proposal. However, here's what we would want to make sure that it would be included. So if you were to choose the first team tonight, HYA, you would let administration, specifically me, indicate to them that this board would like to choose them. However, they definitely want a full-fledged community involvement, community and staff interviews and surveys.
Right.
To get the pulse and the criteria of what they really want in their next superintendent. So that's easy to say, they liked you, however, this is what we want. I'm confident that they would say, sure. And, I'd be safe. I can even indicate that we'd be concerned that only 4 days are taken with that.
Yeah.
That we feel it could very well take more.
Yeah.
And they sounded, I will say that team sounded very adaptive, very conciliatory to what you would want. How does Peter, how do you feel in the sense of supporting the concern the other three have for number one? Would you be willing to support that and go with that, team?
I just have one question about their advertising. So they have 3 different options. Is it because it's related to national and then regional? Like, I guess I don't understand. So it's saying it's more focused advertising, but
Well, they said that they have a website, which one thing I particularly thought was strong, no one else said it about, is that they list every superintendent vacancy on their website, not just the superintendent vacancies for which they are conducting the search. So they know every vacancy for every superintendency in the state that's going on right now, and they list those on their website, even though they're only doing a fraction of the searches of all the vacancies that are occurring right now across the state. I thought that was professional, very professional.
Is there a price difference between
and that's what I
package
don't know.
1, 2, 3?
Show list, but that's what has to be negotiated.
Additional days are billed at $1,000 a day.
But again, it can be negotiated if that's who we go with. I mean, again, remember, they agreed to price match, so it's gonna be 18, whatever, the low one is, plus whatever services not plus.
Comparable to
Huh?
theirs. She made sure the comparable to
I mean, that's,
Yeah.
what they're
that
offering.
may, when you're asking, okay, well, maybe it's been their typical practice that 4 days is more than enough because of something that they do that's different from the rest.
I just want to make sure we're not limiting ourselves to what they're willing to come out and do.
I mean, that's a question you can ask.
Absolutely.
And also the negotiation and the price,
Right.
if,
Could the engagement be any additional days to their 4 that they've stated? It's $1,000 a day. So if we can negotiate
that
there.
may be something that, they can live with.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say Dr. Barr that I can support. I like the through local. I just a little confused about the advertising. I think, the message getting out to be really important. Even for the sake of clarity, not just hiring someone, but conversations that happen with the public. I'd love to see more parents feedback. I think that's really important. I think that's what's missing in our board meetings most of the time is we don't have enough parents. And for different reasons, I'm not blaming them, but if there's a way to inspire them or motivate them to come to see the importance of this big decision. It's a huge decision, and it's even relative to the fact that there's going to be change on the board. So that's a whole nother element that if they can tackle, I think.
Well, even a community forum in this type of approach and understanding with parents, them not coming here, but us going to them and either doing it at a school site and providing some background to what it is that's happening, and maybe at that time getting some of their input.
I remember the last time we did that, it was actually pretty successful.
It was.
So if we could do that, yeah, I mean, it's either way, as far as them and their credentials, they definitely look, very spot on, very clean, just because they've done 6 doesn't mean bad thing. They could be that much, they could be really hungry in that sense, right? Because they don't have as much time.
I would be happy to represent you and negotiate the terms of the price matching, the 4 days, if it's not sufficient, they do the extra days without the extra charge. That would be price matching, quite frankly, because nobody else indicated that if it took more, they would charge.
Right.
And the rest of it, met many of the needs that you've expressed yourselves along the way here, that they, I particularly like the fact that they do pre-screening on every paper screened person before it comes to you. And they use personal networking, not just print. There's a lot of districts around us, and the search consultants have to know those districts and the people that are in them that may want an opportunity to move up or move across. Is that a direction? Is that
Yes.
Is that, Madam Chair, is that something that you want to take an action on tonight then? But
I'll make a motion to vote on it.
Second.
We vote on the
Well,
company,
I would say that we
or
decide tonight, then we
Do you
make a
want-
decision
do
tonight.
you want the feedback that Dr. Barr will get once he talks to them?
Oh, no, what I'm prepared to do is make a motion that we vote on a firm tonight. So that, and then I'll make another motion and say which firm I would propose, or
you can put it in the motion. I think I hear what you're saying. The motion could be that you make a motion to nominate the HYA organization to conduct the search.
that's the motion I'd like to make tonight, and my feelings won't be hurt if there's no second, but that is the motion I'd like.
And then you can, if you want to add that motion is contingent upon a negotiated agreement that comes back.
Oh, yeah, okay, so here's my motion, that we select HYA as a firm, subject to the negotiating to the lowest of the 4 bids, and that we get the level of services necessary for community involvement, so that if it goes over 4 days, there's no additional charge. Good luck, who's ever going to do that.
All those in favor?
Was there a second? Did I hear second?
I did.
I'm sorry. Any discussion on the motion?
And also just making sure that they're also inclusive of the other candidates as far as input, if they can be contacted individually, just as they would contact us, just to get their one-on-one feedback from their perspective as far as the superintendent. I think that's important. I don't know if that was part of the discussion or
I don't think they would
what
disagree
they
with
would, I don't, you know.
I'm sorry,
The candidates for office that they solicit input.
oh,
Which
our board trustee candidates.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I'm thinking candidates superintendent.
No.
Absolutely, that's
Yeah.
the third point, and
Yes.
I will make sure that,
If they can please make sure that they're including that as part of
So
the
is that an
outreach.
addendum to the motion?
I'll amend my motion that they agree to solicit the input of candidates for the governing board of the Hollister School District.
2019.
If the selection is made prior to November 6th.
I'm getting confused. You're gonna vote on the amendment?
yeah.
Rob just amended his.
Rob made a motion. Now, the person who made the second needs to second the amended motion.
Okay, I will second the amended motion.
I'm coming over there to give you a hug back.
Now, is there
Now,
any,
is there any more comments?
yeah, any more discussion on the amended motion?
Okay,
Now we can.
now, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Okay, I think we had a plan.
Good job, board. Good job. Difficult tasks, difficult discussions. You did a nice job.
I think we are.
We did a great job too.
Great team here. Okay.
And then if they say no, then we have to fake it out again.
All right.
Well, then he'll let us know and we'll go back to our pool and
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you, and thank you guys for coming and staying.
Thanks to everybody.